I appreciate you all joining us today. Good morning, and welcome to the first day of the VAFMA Food Safety Summit. This is our third annual statewide food safety summit for farmers markets. I am Kim Hutchinson. I'm the executive director of the Virginia Farmers Market Association. The goal of the summit is to give farmers market managers and vendors the information that you need so that you know about food safety laws and requirements in Virginia. We are extremely grateful to the Virginia Department of Health, the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, the Virginia Cooperative Extension, the Virginia Family Nutrition Program, the Virginia Alcohol Beverage Control Authority, and the Virginia Department of Fire Programs for your partnership on this event. I'd also like to thank the USDA, Farm Credit, Virginia State University, Virginia Fresh Match, and of course, Virginia's for Farmers Market Lovers, Farmers Market University, and our organization for the support of all that you do for Virginia farmers markets. For those of you that are not familiar with VAFMA, we are a membership organization whose mission is to support farmers markets through education, networking, advocacy, and innovation. We support the growth and sustainability of farmers markets statewide. If you find our trainings and resources valuable, we encourage you to consider becoming a member or donating to us. The link to our organization to become a member will also be in the email that is sent out to you. The agenda has been dropped in the Q&A. Actually, I think I dropped it in the chat. So I will drop it in the Q&A and it will go over the agenda for the next 3 days. For those of you that are very specific in what you make, you may not want to participate in the entire Food Safety Summit. You may just want to participate in today's sessions that go over all of the general laws that apply to folks, and then look at the session either tomorrow or Wednesday that is specific to you. Today, we're going to get started with the Virginia Department of Health. That will be followed up with the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. Then we will have the first two presenters that are product specific. We will have produce safety with Eric Bungo, and then weights and measures with Gary Milton. And we will be done by 12, if not before. So I appreciate all of y'all's participation. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. I would like to go ahead and introduce Whitney Wright and Jessica Klemensick with the Virginia Department of Health. Take it away, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
And on behalf of VDH, I just want to thank VAFMA for having us participate this morning. I am going to turn my video off during my presentation, but Jessica and I will be switching off. So good morning and welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all this morning. Jessica is going to be running the slides here, so once she gets those up, we'll get started. Today, we'll be providing an overview of the Virginia Department of Health's Permitting and Food Safety 101 at Virginia Farmers Markets. My name, again, is Whitney Wright, and I'm an Environmental Health Coordinator in the Office of Environmental Health Services Food Safety Division. And presenting with me this morning is Jessica Klemensick, who is our Food Safety Quality Assurance Coordinator. So as Kim pointed out several times, please feel free to put questions in the Q&A during the presentation, and we'll have time at the end to cover as many as we can and try to catch those as we're going through. Also, as always, you can send us questions directly through the VDH Food Safety inbox. Next slide, please. So in the Health Department Food Safety Division, we have a way of speaking our own language and use several acronyms when discussing food safety. And so I wanted to touch on a few of those. CFPM, Certified Food Protection Manager, FDA, Food and Drug Administration, Local Health Department, LHD, MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, PIC, Person in Charge, TCS Food, Time Temperature Control for Safety Food, TFE, Temporary Food Establishment, VDAX, the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and then VDH, Virginia Department of Health. So the next two slides are new for this season. At last year's 2024 General Assembly session, there were two bills that passed and went into law on July 1st, 2024. On this slide is House Bill 57 that allowed food safety exempt organizations to now participate in other events. So there's still three important limitations exempt organizations need to keep in mind. One, the duration of the event cannot be more than 2 days. Two, food may only be prepared in the homes of its members, in the exempt organization's kitchen if they have one, or purchased or donated from a permitted food establishment. And then lastly, any food preparation on site, such as a farmer's market, is not exempt from a permit. However, the permit fee for the exempt organization would be waived by VDH. The second new bill was House Bill 759, also known as the Cake Pop Bill, that increased the gross sales annual revenue cap for sales of pickles and other acidified vegetables, and expanded the location of where acidified vegetables and cottage law foods can be sold at, including where they can advertise their products. This new law is regulated by VDAX and will be covered in more detail in their presentation following this one. A key takeaway here is that these foods now can be sold from any event where VDH would otherwise allow an operation of a TFE, a temporary food establishment, which would include a farmer's market. We're often asked how you can tell the difference between a VDH vendor and a farm or non-VDH vendor at a farmer's market. One way to tell is by looking or asking to see their paper permit or sticker permit. VDH vendors that are set up in tents or other temporary setups should have their paper permit posted from VDH. Mobile units, such as food trucks that are permitted through VDH, will have a sticker that's affixed to the unit in a location that's visible to consumers. So seeing is believing. You can also look at what they're serving to help determine if it's a VDH vendor. VDH vendors will be preparing food on site for sale or sample directly to consumers. As you will see on the right side of the slide, farm vendors or non-VDH vendors are either permitted or inspected by VDAX, or are farmers selling their own farm-produced products or offering samples of their farm-produced products. There is a memorandum of understanding between VDH and VDAX, and under the MOU, many food vendors at farmers markets may be exempt from permitting and inspection by VDH. Vendors who are not regulated by VDH include vendors selling food items from approved sources, such as firms inspected by VDAX, that include home and commercial kitchens and food and beverage manufacturers. We also do not regulate vendors selling packaged food items that are exempt from VDAX inspection under the code section shown here. These vendors can sell their exempt products at farmers markets and do not require a VDH permit to sample these foods. VDAX will be sharing more details on this a little later this morning. Section 35.1-14 Regulations Governing Restaurants, Advisory Standards for Exempt Entities in the Code of Virginia states that the provision of the Food and Drug Administration's Food Code shall not apply to farmers offering their own farm-produced products directly to consumers for their personal use, whether such sales occur on such farmer's farm or at a farmer's market. In addition to this exemption, under the Memorandum of Understanding between VDH and VDAX mentioned earlier, sampling of these farm-produced products are not subject to a VDH permit or inspection. So how do you tell the difference between a sample and food service? Examples of permissible sampling under the MOU are cutting up produce for raw consumption, cutting up baked goods for consumption, heating, cooking a farm-produced sausage or other meat product with limited modification, mixing of dips and service with chips or pretzels, or providing salsa for sampling with chips or pretzels. Examples of activities or samples that require a VDH permit would be more like assembling a pizza, stir fry, casserole, or salad, adding a piece of commercially prepared hot dog to their baked good, pretty much assembling a dish, would be examples of activities that would require a permit. In our next presentation, VDEX is going to provide a little more details on guidelines for providing safe samples at farmers markets. At farmers markets across Virginia, you will typically find three different types of VDH permitted vendors. Permitted food establishments. This is an annually permitted food establishment that is setting up as a vendor at a farmer's market. Think of your brick and mortar food establishments. Mobile food units. These are also annually permitted food establishments that are mobile or on wheels. And the most common vendor at farmers markets are temporary food establishments. These are temporary vendors that are only permitted in connection to a temporary event, such as a farmer's market, which is why they're most common. So now we'll get into all three of those. VDH permitted food establishments sometimes choose to offer food from their normal brick and mortar operation and set up as a temporary vendor at an event such as a farmer's market. When they choose to do so, they're allowed to prepare and serve the same types of food using the same process at the market that is done at their primary location and do not need to obtain additional permits. A copy of their permit still must be posted, and they are subject to VDH inspection, and inspections are based on a VDH risk assessment risk category assigned to that establishment. Mobile food unit is defined as a food establishment mounted on wheels, readily movable from place to place at all times during operation, and shall include push carts, trailers, trucks, or vans. The unit, all operations, and all equipment must be integral to and be within or attached to the unit. These are commonly called food trucks or carts and are permitted by the local health department where the commissary or owner-operator resides if a commissary is not required. Due to the nature of the unit being mobile, these food establishments have an annual permit sticker that is valid statewide. However, some jurisdictions in the state may have additional permitting or requirements, so please check ahead of setup and operation. Mobile unit inspections, like brick and mortar food establishment inspections, are done based on risk assessment to determine the frequency. I have mentioned several times today that mobile units have a permit sticker. On this slide, you can see the valid mobile unit stickers for this season are red and green, or to make it easy to remember, red for stop, green for go. While at the bottom left, you'll see that yellow, think caution, these stickers are now expired. On the sticker, you can see the month of expiration and the year the permit expires. Under that, you'll find other contact information related to the mobile unit and the local health department name where the mobile unit was permitted. This information is helpful should you wish to look up the inspection history for the mobile unit or who to contact with questions related to the mobile unit permit. Again, these permit stickers should be in plain view where the public is served. Our last VDH category of permit, and probably, again, the most common you'll find at farmers markets, is the temporary food establishments, or TFEs. In our Virginia food regulations, a TFE is defined as a food establishment that operates for a period of no more than 14 consecutive days in conjunction with a single event or celebration. TFEs are also inspected based on risk assessment and typically are inspected ahead of first service. Farmers markets managers and vendors should be aware that an application for a TFE permit must be submitted at least 10 days prior to the operation of the farmer's market. This is very important to ensure that TFE vendors provide the local health department time to process their application, obtain any additional information that might be needed, and to plan for any inspections that might be required of head of operation. We recommend checking with the local health department where the farmer's market is located in advance to discuss any additional requirements that might be subject to that location. Permits for TFEs are only valid for the specified period of time on the permit. This can be up to 12 months and is not transferable from person to person. Permits must be posted during operation at the event at all times. TFEs are required to have all food preparation occur on site at the event and are required to have the person in charge of the pick be a certified food protection manager, CFPM. So no food from home. Here is an example of what a VDH TFE permit looks like. The permit must be posted where it can be easily seen by the public when operating and serving food. The permit will include the expiration date, the name of the operator, the type of permit, the name of the local health department, and the risk category. So now I'm going to transition and pass it over to Jessica, who's going to get into the operational requirements of VDH permitted food establishments and walk through some example scenarios. So Jessica, let me pull your slides up and then you can get started.
We're going to talk about the operational requirements for VDH permitted establishments, which include our brick and mortars, our mobile food units, and our TFEs. Regardless of what type of VDH permit you hold, there are operational requirements that apply. Um, First thing, you will need to identify the person in charge or pick. This is the person present at a food establishment who is responsible for the food service operations at the time of inspection. Depending on your menu and process, you may need a certified food protection manager or CFPM. The CFPM is an employee that has the authority to oversee and manage food preparation activities and food service and could be the PIC. To receive a CFPM certificate, the candidate must pass a test from one of the American National Standards Institute or ANSI recognized programs. This credential demonstrates that they know what they need to about food safety regulations and safe food preparation and handling. A TCS food is a food that requires time and temperature control for safety to limit the growth of harmful germs or toxins in the food. Most VDH permitted food establishments are required to have at least one CFPM. The exceptions are if the food establishment does not serve TCS foods, or they do not cook TCS foods, or they only reheat fully cooked commercially processed foods, or they only cold hold commercially processed foods. If you are going to cook or cool any TCS foods, your operation will need a CFPM. So all food needs to come from approved sources. When we say approved sources, we mean a manufacturer or supplier that is inspected on a regular basis by a regulatory agency. If you aren't sure your food suppliers are an approved source, please reach out to your local health department, and I'll explain how to do that later in this presentation. When we think of employee health and hygiene, think of that as a three-legged stool, where each leg represents an element that is essential to safe food handling practices, such as employee health, hand washing, and no bare hand contact. If one leg isn't strong, the others won't work well either. These go hand in hand to prevent foodborne illnesses. We also want to make sure that you're following the Virginia food regulations, which are modeled after the FDA food code. The regulations identify the proper time and temperatures for which various TCS foods need to be cooked to kill disease causing germs. Your CFPM should know what these minimum temperatures are and should be monitoring and verifying the temperatures with a food thermometer while on site. You also want to make sure that your cold food stays cold at or below 41 degrees and hot food stays hot at or above 135 degrees Fahrenheit. This stops harmful germs from rapidly growing and making someone ill. Lastly, when utensils or equipment get dirty, they can transfer germs that can make you sick to the food. If utensils or equipment aren't cleaned and sanitized regularly, bits of old food are left on the utensils and equipment at room temperature, allowing the bacteria in that old food to grow rapidly. If ready to eat food touches those dirty utensils or equipment, the food can get contaminated too. When you are at a farmer's market or TFE, you will need to have, most likely, you will need to have a hand washing station. If you are handling any foods and or cooking and handling foods, you will need a hand wash station. And they come in many shapes and forms, as you can see in the picture. No matter what kind of hand washing station you use, you need to have a gravity fed container with a spigot filled with warm water from an approved source, a catch bucket to keep the dirty water from falling on the ground, hand soap, and paper towels. So this slide provides a visual of and overview of the 5 risk factors for foodborne illness, which I discussed in the pre-operational or operational requirements slide. The 5 risk factors for foodborne illness are food from unapproved sources. So you need to make sure that you have your receipts and invoices available while you're at the farmer's market. And as a reminder, water is considered food. So you need to make sure you use an approved water hose. Green garden hoses are not acceptable. They need to be food grade, like the example in the slide. Improper employee health and hygiene. Do not work when you are sick. You want to make sure you wash your hands after changing tasks, change gloves when they become dirty or torn, and wash your hands before putting new gloves on. Improper holding temperatures include hot and cold holding. Use a thin tip probe thermometer to check your food temperatures. And keep thermometers in your cooler or refrigerator at the warmest location to easily monitor the temperature. Improper cooking temperatures are number 4 on the list. Use a thin tip probe thermometer to check your food temperatures. And the 5th risk factor is dirty and or contaminated utensils and equipment. You need to make sure that you wash, rinse, and sanitize your food contact surfaces regularly. Check your sanitizer concentration using the appropriate test strip. Prevent cross contamination of ready to eat foods and prevent contamination of clean utensils and equipment. Dispose of your wastewater properly. Do not dispose on the ground or in a storm drain. You should check with your market manager or coordinator to see if they are providing wastewater disposal. Approved methods of disposal include through a sanitary sewer connection or approved wastewater tanks collected by an approved wastewater disposal company. So, you all may have some questions about going about how to get a TFE permit. We've created a couple of scenarios for you. The first scenario is Whitney wants to sell tacos at his local farmer's market. What does he need to do? He should contact the local health department. They will provide him with the TFE application and walk Whitney through the process. As a reminder, not all local health departments use the state application, and there are many local requirements specific for events like farmers markets. So please be sure to contact your local health department where the farmers market takes place way in advance, more than 10 days, to see if they have local requirements. Complete the TFE application and pay the $40 state fee. Please be aware that there may be local fees that apply as well. You need to do this at least 10 days prior to participating in a farmer's market. You want to keep the receipt of the $40 state fee payment. Here are some tips for Whitney when filling out his application. Know the name and location of the farmer's market. Know who the market coordinator is and have their contact information. Know the dates of the farmer's market. This is the date range which you plan to operate. The dates of operation could be a single farmer's market, or it could be multiple farmers markets, or a market with multiple dates. For example, the RVA Big Market at Bryan Park is a weekly market occurring throughout the summer and winter. The dates, know what foods will be on his menu. Please be reminded that any food that you are going to be preparing and serving need to be listed on your TFE application. If you show up with a food that was not approved from your TFE application, you will not be able to sell it. And then make sure that he has a copy of his or his staff's CFPM certificate available. They must be on site at the farmer's market during operation. Here we have our scenario number 2. Whitney obtained a TFE permit for selling tacos last month from Richmond City Health Department and has decided he would like to participate in a farmer's market in Virginia Beach. What does he need to do? If the permit has not expired, he should contact Virginia Beach Health Department, provide them with a copy of his TFE permit issued by Richmond City, his most recent VDH inspection report, and let them know he is planning to participate in a farmer's market in Virginia Beach. Virginia Beach will determine if any additional steps are needed. If the permit is expired, he should contact the Virginia Beach Health Department. They will provide him with the TFE application and walk him through the process again. He should also provide a copy of his receipt from Richmond City to avoid any additional state fees if it's within the calendar year. To our market managers and coordinators, we are here to help you have a successful market. Here are some points to consider. Some localities have local ordinances with more stringent requirements than the state food regulations, and those could apply to the market. It could apply to mobile food units. So we want you to reach out to the local health department where you're going to be participating in the market. Some localities have local event coordinator forms to complete. So you'll want to reach out and make sure if you need to complete that. Do not hesitate to contact us with any of your questions. Now, how can you help us, you ask? Work with the local health department when organizing your market. Remember, we're here to make sure you have a successful event, and we want you to be successful. Let us know when and where the market will open in advance. Keep in mind, VDH TFE vendors need to apply for a permit at least 10 days prior to their participation in the farmer's market. Provide your list of vendors so we can determine who is exempt, who needs permitting, and who requires a CFPM. It is not fun for our inspectors to show up at an event or farmer's market and see a vendor that was not on the vendor list. So it's really important that you get your vendor list to the health department prior to the market day. Request the vendor or farmer to provide you with a copy of their VDH or VDAX permit. We've covered a lot of information today, and you may have more questions that not get answered. We want to plug the Virginia Farmer Market Association, or VAFMA. Their website has a running list of frequently asked questions. They've compiled questions and answers received from last year's summit into a comprehensive document, which can be found by visiting their website at the link provided. Here's a screenshot of the table of contents from last year's Q&A. As you can see, it's quite extensive. There are a few ways to locate your local health department or a local health department. You can use this QR code and it will take you to our location, how to locate your health department. Um, this is what our local health district page looks like. And the link will be provided on our resources slide at the end of this presentation. You can find your local health department one of two ways. Use the health department locator tool, which is circled in orange, or refer to the map and click on the local health district name. Once you enter the local health district page, click on the environmental health or food safety link. When you visit our Food Safety in Virginia website, this is what our main landing page looks like. You can find information that includes policies and local ordinances, TFE, mobile units, and the VDAX VDH MOU. This slide indicates what localities have local requirements for TFE and mobile units is on our policies and local ordinances page. If you're in a pinch, this QR code will take you directly to our TFE page. And this is what it looks like. Here you can find a lot of information that may be helpful. This QR code will take you directly to the VDH VDAX MOU page. And this is what that page looks like. You'll be able to see the retail food service MOU between VDH and VDAX. These are the links to see the exemptions to the VDAX and food regulations and the VDH food regulations from the Code of Virginia. And then here is our list of resources for vendors. You'll notice that at the bottom bullet is the food safety inbox, and you are welcome to use that email to reach out with any questions or concerns that you have. I monitor the inbox, and I promise I will get you to the answer or to the local health department so that they can manage your inquiries. And we just want to say thank you for this opportunity to present today. It's a lot of information and it can be hard to sort through. So feel free to contact Whitney or myself directly. And then again, our food safety inbox is here. So please take note of that. It's never a dull moment in environmental health. So we like answering and figuring out how to help you. And I think we'll take some questions now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we've got some questions in the chat. Some of these, I believe, are going to be for VDAX, excuse me. The cottage law, that's going to be answered by VDAX and weights and measures. Let me skim through here. Let's see. Cheese, etc., and bread, that's also VDAX. Does infused honey need a health department permit?
I believe that's covered by VDAX.
VDAX too, yeah, I think you're right. Infused honey, I know different infusions need a permit. Does a class 1 mobile unit require a permit? This is one for you.
I'm not sure what class 1 means. If you're able to explain or describe the situation, if I mean, we permit mobile units like shaved ice, lemonade carts, coffee carts. So if you're preparing food, you'll need a mobile food unit permit.
So we have a question that is, I have a food cart. I don't need a commissary for my cart, which I think they do, right? But they want to start selling
Yeah.
pickleball. How do I go about doing that?
So most mobile units will need a form of commissary unless you can demonstrate that you have a fully self-contained unit. Also, there are localities that require a commissary regardless of you being fully self contained. Most likely, if you have some type of push cart, that will require a commissary.
Yeah, I'll just add in that a food cart is considered a mobile unit, and would be permitted just like a mobile unit based on whatever its operation is. So um, just because it's a food cart, it's still considered a mobile unit as defined.
Thank you,
Okay.
Whitney.
Okay.
Um,
And I'm trying to type that answer in to the chat. Last year, those answers that we answered live, we didn't have the answers once we went back. So if we could try and type those answers into the chat also, that would be great. Is there a TFE permit required if doing a pancake fundraiser for a farmer's market?
so, a couple of questions that we would need to know. Number one, are you an organization that meets the exemptions that Whitney showed? Like, are you a 501c3? Are you a church or volunteer fire and rescue department? The next question would be, where are you going to prepare the pancakes? If you meet one of those exemptions and you prepare them in the kitchen of the member's home or kitchen of the organization, then you would not need a TFE permit. But if you wanted to prepare those pancakes on site, you would need a TFE permit. You would just be exempt from paying the $50, $40 fee, excuse me, or waived the $40 fee. I don't want to get exemptions confused.
And the last part of that would be the duration of the event. The other limitation that I mentioned was it can't be more than 2 days. So that would be the House Bill 57 that I mentioned, refer to that slide.
Can a TFE vendor prepare food at a commissary?
So this is an interesting question. I want to say that if the commissary is permitted by VDH and the TFE vendor has a signed commissary agreement from that commissary permit holder, that they should be able to use that commissary to prepare food at a TFE event. Again, there may be some local ordinances that do not allow that. Um, so you can reach out to me and I can put you in touch with that local health department.
Thank you. And I had dropped Jessica's email into the chat. However, you will receive contact information for each of the presenters in the follow-up email. You're going to get a long email as a follow-up to this. It's going to have links to the presentations, the Q&A. It's going to have the statewide food safety manual that we're putting together that's going to be broken down by categories. It's going to have their contact information, etc. So if you don't quite get it all today or over the next 3 days, because it's a lot of information, you will know how to reach out, and um, they're very open to answering your questions. Let's see. Can you repeat the exemptions for having a food protection manager certification as a vendor? Would the ServSafe food handler certification be adequate?
So I'll take that last question first. ServSave food handler is not the same as ServSave food protection manager. A food handler certificate is not a substitute for the CFPM or Certified Food Protection Manager certificate. And the situations where you would not need a CFPM certificate would be that you are not handling any TCS, time temperature control for safety foods, and that you are either hot holding a commercially prepared product or cold holding a commercially prepared product. And there is no cooling allowed. And Kim, I will go back in through the Q&A and type answers in so you don't have to do
I
that.
appreciate that. I don't want to make a
Yeah, I
mistake.
was gonna say we can go back and make sure that
Yeah.
each one is addressed.
Caterers are also considered permanent, like brick and mortar at markets. Is that correct?
So this question comes up a lot, and the way to think about this is Yes, because they have to operate out of a brick and mortar facility. So a caterer is a type of food establishment permit. It's a category of a food establishment permit.
Okay. Uh, if they have a health department permit for their kitchen and market, do they still need another permit or inspection?
If they have a VDH permitted food establishment permit, and they aren't changing the process that they do in from their brick and mortar, they do not need an additional permit. Um, an example would be when you would need a permit is if they sell prepared sandwiches at Starbucks. They don't make them there. So if Starbucks wanted to come to the farmers market and assemble sandwiches, they would need to apply for a TFE permit.
And I'll
Okay.
just add that they're always subject to inspection when they're under permit.
Yes.
Yes.
You're not exempt. You still
Doesn't matter
need
when they're operating. Yeah.
Yep, and you still need your hand washing station. You still need your 3 tubs set up. Yes, you're not exempt from any of the operational requirements. You're just exempt from having to apply for an additional permit.
Okay, thank you. When would you approve a TFE to operate without a hand washing setup? Never.
I would say if they were only bringing prepackaged product and selling it, but that's going to be up to the local health department.
Yeah.
So they
It
would need
is.
to reach out to local health department.
So, and would you explain that just as just take a moment and explain that because I think that folks don't understand that there are state laws that come out of the General Assembly that y'all oversee, and that's the mandatory requirements of what everybody has to do. And then there are regional health departments that may have even more regulations that have to be um, enforced, et cetera. Like Northern Virginia has additional regs for vendors at farmers markets. So could you talk to that for a moment?
Yeah, so think of it as state regulations and then local ordinances. The state regulations cover the state of Virginia, and then local ordinances cover that specific locality, and they can be more stringent than the state regulations. So, off the top of my head, since I'm from Hampton and worked for Hampton, Hampton's local code requires a commissary for a mobile food unit permit, regardless if you have a fully self contained vehicle. Hampton requires a commissary in order to operate a mobile food unit. Hampton also has a special events ordinance, which is a collaboration between their local city agencies like Commissioner of Revenue, Zoning, Fire, Building Official, and the Health Department. So, in order to participate in a special event or hold a special event, I should say hold, not participate. That event coordinator would have to go to a special events meeting that they hold once a month and get signed off by each department. So the state doesn't require that, but some localities have more stringent requirements.
Yeah, and I can just add, like in Northern Virginia, they might have some of the jurisdictions might have separate licensing programs through their local governments. And so, I'm from Northern Virginia, and so I know that some of them do have different stickers, different licenses that they issue that is beyond the state sticker and state license. So keep that in mind. All of them are listed on our website and their contact information. So if you're planning to operate wherever you're planning to operate, again, can't stress it enough to reach out to the local jurisdiction just so you can get ahead of any extra requirements that might be out there.
Thank you. We have a comment, which if y'all could address. I hear this a lot from market managers that find it disheartening that they require all of their vendors to follow the law. And when the vendor doesn't, they go and apply to another market that lets them in. In this specific case, they're talking about a vendor having a TFE, and other markets will let that vendor in without it when they've not followed the law. What can somebody do in order to be able to, we see this across the board where you've got markets that mandate that their vendors follow the law for everybody's liability and safety of the consumers and protecting the markets. And then there are markets that don't. What is y'all's comment on that?
I
Sticky here.
I mean, the point of having state food regulations is to be consistent. Those requirements, they're the same for everybody, whether you're selling just beverages or doing a complete full service menu at market. If there's I would say if you run into an issue like that, contact either me or Whitney directly or the food safety inbox so that we can work with the local health department to remedy the situation. It's hard not knowing all the context, but believe me, I understand the pain and annoyance that can be.
Yeah, and I can jump in a little bit. And so like typically our local health districts are the ones that kind of police a lot of that. And sometimes when you have vendors associated with the farmers market or even other street vendors that are operating without proper permitting and licensing. A lot of times those local health departments have to collaborate with the local government, local law enforcement in order to police those. And so the best thing to do is to not confront them, but to report it through the local channels so that it can be addressed that way. Because there are, localities that have enforcement procedures set up that they can route those out and monitor for activities that are going on. But I would definitely say that if you find that, the best thing to do is report it so that we can get it to the right folks to try to police that activity.
I appreciate it. Let's take a couple of more and then I'll let y'all start answering the rest online as so that we can try and get done by noon. Okay, I think homemade syrups and oat milk, that's all under VDEX, right? Okay.
Yep, we'll answer that.
Okay, thanks. And yes, all of the slides, all the recordings are going to be on our website. The person that was asking about the class 1 mobile unit says that it's all pre-made food, pre-packaged food.
It would still need a permit if it's a mobile unit.
Yeah.
It would just be a risk category 1 mobile unit. And so the risk assessment, it might not be inspected as frequently as one that has cooking or cold holding, hot holding, that kind of stuff. But if it's a mobile unit serving food to the public, it would still be a permit through the local health department.
Okay.
And Kim, if I could jump in, because there seems to be a lot of chatter about the different classes of mobile units. In it, they may be thinking of fire marshals requirements because I believe they do classify mobile units. Our state food regulations do not currently classify mobile units. Our local health departments may classify the different types, but our state food regulations do not at this time. That could be changing in the future. Plugging that now.
Okay. I'm going to let y'all jump on and answer some of these questions that we haven't gotten to, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And we'll circle back. I see that Troy, we do have the fire marshal, the Virginia Department of Fire Services with us. Troy, did you want to answer or input briefly? Or wait until you do your presentation? This is what happens when you show up early. You get
Yeah.
called on.
I'm not sure exactly what the question was, but yes, to Jessica's point, we do require permits for mobile food preparation vehicles that meet certain requirements, and that's what I'm gonna go into on Wednesday, I think, Wednesday morning.
Sure.
I'm allotted 30 minutes, so I'll get into as much as I can. Of course, like anything code related, it's not all cut and dry. Not every mobile food preparation vehicle is a box with somebody making hot dogs in it. So we'll get into more of that, but depending on what type of mobile food preparation vehicle you have, you would be required to be permitted through our office or another office, depending on where you're out of. And even if you're on state property, for example, and you are permitted to another locality, we might still do a safety inspection while we're there.
Thank you so much. And regarding your allotment of 30 minutes, you certainly are, we probably will be able to go longer on Wednesday, as I'm not sure that we will, some of the presenters won't probably take the whole amount of time, or we also can stay on after if your schedule permits, or we can just answer questions afterwards. So I appreciate your participation. We found last year that the fire marshal questions come up a lot, so glad you could join us today.
Well, if nothing else, I'll get my contact out there, and then I can steer everyone on here to our website that answers a lot of questions, and then if they can't be answered, they can contact our office.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Jessica and Whitney, thank you also for your presentation on the overview of the food safety laws. These are not do it, if you want to. These are mandatory requirements written into the law in Virginia, and I appreciate y'all answering those questions, as well as thank you for following up and answering the questions in the chat for us. For
Yeah,
those
we're
that-
gonna, Kim, just real quick, we're gonna stay on. So
Okay.
if questions come up in the next presentation that come to us, we'll be monitoring. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you so
Yep.
much. We're going to move on to VDAX. There's, as you can see, there are a lot of different agencies and there's a lot of overlap. I know it is a lot of information. Yes, it's being recorded. It will be on our website. The information will be sent out to you so you can go back and refer to it, and you can follow up with questions that come to you 3 days later and send those, and we can get those answers too. So don't stress out about it. I'm going to turn it over now to Rochelle Bland and Karen Bergen with the Virginia Department of Agriculture Consumer Services. These are our partners on food safety and everything you need to know regarding the big overview for VDAX. So take it away, ladies.
All right, thank you, Kim, and thank you, VAFMA, for having us. We really appreciate participating in the Food Summit every year and continuing our collaborations outside of the summit as well. We're here to help you guys as you have questions and navigating. As Kim said, there's a lot of overlap between the agencies, and we all work together to try to get your questions answered and get you in the right place. So today I'm going to start sharing my screen. Karen and I are food safety managers with the VDAX Food Safety Program. I'm going to do like the first half of our slides, and then I'll turn it over to Karen, and she'll continue through our presentation. Righty, so again, we are VDAX, Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. We're located within our Office of Dairy and Foods, and we are the Food Safety Program. So we wanted to start off with some legislative updates. As Whitney went over in their presentation earlier, last year there were some updates made to the VDAX exemption for home food processors. So we're just recapping legislative updates from last year that included increasing the gross annual sales revenue cap for sales of pickles and acidified vegetables. That went up from $3,000 to $9,000. And previously the exemption only allowed for sales out of the private home or at the farmer's market. And last year it was updated to include the temporary events that VDH also went over. And we'll get into the specifics of the exemption later on in the presentation. This is just recapping changes from last year to the law. And then again, that law clarified that you may advertise your food on the internet, but you still cannot sell it. And the exemption is very specific. You cannot do online sales. So those are our recaps. No changes to the exemption for this year. Then just an overview of the difference in jurisdiction and regulation. So a lot of this is recap from what Whitney and Jessica already went over, but Essentially, all food products must be made in a inspected and permitted kitchen unless an exemption applies and is followed. So again, we'll get into the exemptions a little bit later in the presentation. But overall, VDATS has jurisdiction over retail stores such as grocery and convenience stores, large and small manufacturers. This is where a lot of you guys come in, because that does include the home kitchen processors and commercial kitchen food processing operations. And we also permit warehouses. And then VDH, as they went over, they do restaurants, mobile food units, and temporary food establishments. On our end, we have several different regulations and laws, our main one being the Virginia Food and Drink Law. This is where the home kitchen food processing exemption is detailed. And then we also, on our manufacturing side, as home kitchen vendors and commercial kitchen vendors are considered manufacturers for us, we have several FDA regulations that we enforce as well. The main ones being 21 CFR 101. This is food labeling. It is a very extensive regulation, and we'll be highlighting the main things that you guys need to know in this presentation. But if you have more complicated products or additional regulations, we work with you on those outside of that. And then the primary manufacturing regulation is 21 CFR 117. This covers good manufacturing practices. So things like making sure your sanitizer is appropriate and you're cooking to the proper temperature, your facility's in good condition, all of that is contained within this regulation. But then if you have specialty foods such as seafood, juice, acidified products, dietary supplements, there are regulations additional to 117 and 101 that may also apply. And again, we work with you through the permitting and the inspection process. This is just a snapshot. Okay, so this is your biggest question, I'm sure, how to start your new food processing business in Virginia. So we have our website and we have a QR code as well as the link. You can email us your application, you can call us, you can mail it. I think I have that on the next slide. But on our website, we have permit applications for all of the different types of permits we have. We're primarily focusing on home and commercial kitchens today. We also have how-to documents for each application, and I really highly recommend our how-to documents. They go like page by page and section by section of our application. We put a lot of work into that to help you guys have a lot of information on the front end to help you when putting that together. We have informational handouts and additional guidance documents, as well as links to all of our laws and regulations. So there's a lot on our website, and if you can't find something, you can always reach out to us. So one question that we get pretty often is, what is the difference between a home food processor and a commercial kitchen? So a home food processor is just that. You're operating in the kitchen that is within your private residence. There are some localities that do not allow home food processing at all. There are some that have restrictions on the types of food you can make within a home, but it also requires zoning approval to be able to be a home food processor. Commercial kitchen is someone that operates in a shared or commissary kitchen that's not within a private residence. So for example, if you're working out of your local church's kitchen, the church's kitchen has to be permitted as a commissary kitchen, and then you as a business have to be permitted to use that kitchen as well. So that's the main difference. For VDACs, our applications are largely the same. You're still submitting pretty much the same information. The biggest difference is for your home. You'll need to get approval from your locality zoning office. For a commercial kitchen, you will need to provide a lease or some kind of agreement or approval that the owner of that kitchen is allowing you to use that for your food business. But that's like the primary difference between the two. Everything else is generally the same as far as submitting your products or recipes, things like that. And then we also have our general warehouses and manufacturers. Those are brick and mortar locations outside of a commercial kitchen or a home. So our permit application process, as I mentioned, our applications are available on our website. We can also email them to you directly or physically mail them to you upon request. Once your application packet is ready, you can submit them to us via email or by mail to our PO box that's on the slide. Then we will log it in our system and you will receive an application number. So please make sure you go through the application checklist and that everything is provided in your application packet. If If you have any questions before you submit, please reach out to us at Food Safety. That is a monitored inbox, and we get back to you as soon as we can. During the process, our process has changed a little bit over the last year or so. Now when we receive our applications to the inbox, you will receive your application number typically within a week. Usually it's like a day or two. And then you'll be provided with a list of things that may be missing up front. So that has helped us with our review process, because prior, you may not have been getting that feedback right away. So now you submit your application, within a week or two, you get a general checklist like, hey, we don't see your floor plan, or hey, you have this listed on your product list, but the label's not there. General things like that. This check is just for completeness of your application. Once it goes to your actual reviewer, they are going to let you know if things are correct or things need to be fixed. So again, that first text that you are getting from us is your application number and a general list of things that are missing from your application. Once you move forward in the review process, that's when we'll actually start going back and forth with you on making sure that things are correct. So an application reviewer may contact you for revisions or request additional information. And after that application review is complete, one of our inspectors will contact you to set up your pre-operational inspection. This is when you're pretty much ready to go, almost ready to start making your products and selling them. And after satisfactory completion of that inspection is when you will receive approval to sell your products. You will get your inspection report and a copy of your permit. After you have completed the application process and initial inspection, you are approved to sell only the products that are included in your approved application. So a lot of times, because the application process can be pretty thorough, we recommend not sending like 30 products at the same time. We can get you started with 5 or 10, because the initial application process is going to be the one that takes the most time. And once you're actually permitted and approved, you can submit new product information sheets and labels, and those will get added to your file. You will not be going through the whole application process again. So we sometimes have applications where someone is trying to get 50 products approved. That will greatly lengthen the time that it takes to review your application. So we do recommend tampering it down, 5 or 10 products. We can get you started, get you up and running, and then we can work on the other products as you go, because we want you guys to be able to be ready to go and sell your products sooner rather than later. We also recommend that you email a copy of your labels for us to review before you print them. So label review is already part of the permit application process, but as we know, you guys, your business grows, or you change your theme or change your style, and that's completely okay. But we know that labels can be expensive to print, so we just recommend, if you have any questions about changing up the layout or putting new information on your label, please reach out to us first so we can help you get it right before you spend that money. It's just something that we prefer to do for you guys to make it more efficient. One thing that comes up a lot for our home processors, if you have pets in your home, areas where the food is prepared or stored must be completely enclosed and separated, and pets must be excluded from the areas at all times. This really comes into play for homes that have open floor plans. There's no real way to exclude your pet from your kitchen with like a solid hinge door. So that may not be a kitchen that we're able to permit, because you can't meet that requirement. So some people make their processing area their garage or their basement, somewhere where they can guarantee that there are solid hinge doors and their pets do not enter at all. Okay. And then, as I mentioned, there are certain products that are specialized processes. There's not too much to go into on this slide. It's just making sure you guys are aware that certain products do have additional regulations attached to them. So if you're making juice products, seafood products, dietary supplements, these are, and acidified foods, these are our most common ones. We have just provided QR codes and links to the FDA's website on those products, but we again help you with that throughout the application process. There's going to be additional requirements for those higher risk products. And then this is the fourth one I mentioned, the acidified food processing. We have links to a process authority list. This is a process authority is someone who's going to be evaluating your product for safety and making sure you have your recipe and things like that. ready to go by the time you apply to us so we can approve it. And then there's also a registration that's required by the FDA for these types of food. So again, this is just general information. If you're making these types of products, please speak with us on the side and we'll give you the more specific guidance. For dairy processing, dairy in Virginia is split between VDAX dairy and VDH dairy. So manufacturing dairy products like cheese or butter or frozen desserts like ice cream, this is making these products from scratch. Those will typically be under VDAX Dairy Services, and we have their contact information up on the slide. Whereas manufacturing grade A products such as pasteurized milk, yogurt, cottage cheese, sour cream, that's under VDH. And we did have the same QR code that Whitney had, where Whitney and Jessica had, where it takes you to the different local health districts. So you can contact the people most relevant to your business. One thing that comes up with dairy processing is non-dairy products. So if you have plant-based milks and things like that, those will require a permit, but those would, instead of going under VDAX dairy, because it is not a dairy product, it is a plant-based product, it would go under food safety. So if you're making a dairy cheese, VDAX dairy. If you're making a plant-based like cashew cheese or something like that, that's VDAX food safety. And then meat and poultry products. Food containing meat, poultry, or catfish cannot be made in a home food processing operation. However, you may make certain things in a commercial kitchen or your brick and mortar manufacturing establishment under food safety. And then those examples include closed-face sandwiches, products containing less than 2% cooked meat and poultry or 3% meat and poultry. Beyond the certain exemptions for what we can do under food safety, that then goes over to the VDAX Office of Meat and Poultry Services, because they deal with USDA jurisdiction products and we deal with FDA. So again, this is one of those things that overlap between different programs. So when in doubt, please ask and we will get you to the right place. Alcohol in food. Food products cannot be sold in Virginia if it has more than 0.5% alcohol by volume. So typically when you want to sell a product with alcohol in it, you have to have it tested for the alcohol content. There are certain exemptions that I won't get too much into because that's ABC's jurisdiction. But if you're making like baked goods with alcohol in them, that's a type of food that would be jointly regulated, where ABC would be involved regarding the alcohol content, and then we would be involved because it's a food product that we permit. So again, another scenario where you can do it, but there are restrictions and specific guidelines you need to go through, and that is with us and ABC for these. Eggs. We do have an egg exemption. You can sell the following amount of eggs without state inspection, up to 150 dozen eggs per week produced by your own hens, or up to 60 dozen eggs per week produced from another producer's hens. And if you sell these eggs, they must be clean and unbroken, properly refrigerated at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or below, and properly labeled. And the next slide goes into a little bit more about egg labeling. So they need a statement of identity. What are they? Eggs. Net quantity, whether it's 12 eggs or a dozen or half dozen, your business name and your address, the appropriate grade or ungraded if there is no grade. Eggs labeled as fresh must also meet grade A standards, and you must have a keep refrigerated statement and safe handling instructions. And then this is where we're getting into our food exemptions. So everything I've talked about so far is for our permitted establishment. So again, most food needs a permit unless it is specifically called out in our exemption. Our food and drink law, section 5130, allows specific certain foods to be made from your private home without a permit from VDAX, but there are certain stipulations that are attached to that. So the general categories that these fall under are low-risk foods, acidified foods, and honey. And we're going to go into each of those categories in the slides. But we also have this QR code that takes us to our FAQ document, where we also go into like specific scenarios and answer specific questions about the exemption, because it is a very popular and widely used one, and we want to make sure everyone's complying with it and doing it right. So first category is probably the largest category, is low risk foods. The foods on this slide are the specific foods that are allowed by the exemption. So I'm just going to call out a couple of them: candies, dried fruits, dried herbs, popcorn, vinegars, coffee, tea, cereal, baked goods that do not require time or temperature control after preparation. So a cupcake is non-TCS, so time temperature control for safety, whereas a cheesecake requires typically requires temperature and time control after preparation. So that cupcake may be exempt, the cheesecake would not be. So again, I want to stress these are the foods allowed under the exemption for this category. If you do not see it on this list, it is not exempt and you need a permit to sell it. Common things we run into are syrups. While vinegars are on here, syrups are not. So if you're making your own syrup, if you're making a vanilla extract that's not on the list of allowable foods under the exemption, you need a permit to do that. And then we also get lots of questions about baked goods. So please ask us if you're unsure of your recipe. And I can't see the Q&A right now, but we'll be addressing your questions as they come up. So in addition to the food being on the list of things allowed under the exemption, if you're operating under the exemption or the pottage law, these are the requirements that go along with that. These products can only be made in your home kitchen and sold in person to an individual for them to consume. The products are required to be labeled with general labeling information, which we'll get into later in the presentation, but they also require this disclaimer statement: not for sale, processed and prepared without state inspection. That also requires the phone number of the producer, the date it was prepared, and a couple of other things. So again, you're making it in your private home. It's something that we come across a lot is vendors are operating out of a commercial kitchen, making the foods allowed under the exemption, but you're out of your private home, so the exemption no longer applies. So you have to make the products in your own private home, and they have to be products allowed by the exemption. And then our next bullet is, again, you can sell it from your home, you can sell it at the farmer's market, and then the newest update from last year is that you can now sell them at temporary events, typically permitted by VDH. Products cannot be sold to other businesses. You cannot sell them for resale. You cannot put them in a food establishment for consignment or anything like that. You cannot sell them on the internet, and you cannot sell across state lines. If you are out of compliance with any of these things, or you do, for example, want to sell across state lines, because let's say you live in Alexandria and you want to participate in DC farmers markets, you can do that, but you need a permit. So again, if these are the requirements to operate under cottage law or exemption without a permit or state inspection. If you're not able to comply or you want to do more things than is allowed, please apply for a permit. And then these requirements are no longer in play. You can sell your products online. You can sell them across state lines. You can sell them for resale. So get permitted and you don't have to worry about these. And I believe the next slide is where Karen is going to take over to talk about the other categories of our exemption, as well as preparing for the market.
Good morning. So acidified foods that are allowed under the exemption are pickles that have an equilibrium pH of 4.6 or lower, or acidified vegetables that have an equilibrium pH of 4.6 or lower. Some examples include pickled products, salsas, chow-chows, relishes, and other similar types of vegetables. Next slide, please. The acidified food precautions to reduce the likelihood that foodborne illness, home-canned acidified foods must have an equilibrium pH value of 4.6 or lower to inhibit the growth of the formation of toxins from bacteria that can cause botulism. An electronic pH meter should be purchased so that you can test your product. The home food processor is responsible for determining whether the product is an acidified product. We strongly advise that you have your manufacturing process reviewed and validated by a competent process authority. And that was one of the QR links that was in Rochelle's part of the presentation. Home food processors are strongly encouraged to complete a recognized Better Process Control School course as well. Next slide. Requirements for an acidified food produced under the exemption. Products can only be made in your private residence, your home, and sold in person or to an individual for their own consumption. Product packages are required to be labeled with the information on the principal display panel as required by law, and the statement of not for sale, processed and prepared without state inspection must be on the label. Products can be sold from the private home where the product is manufactured. It could be sold at a farmer's market or at a temporary event that operates for a period of no more than 14 days. Products cannot be sold to other businesses for resale on the internet or across state lines. Producers of acidified food must not exceed the $9,000 total annual gross sale for acidified products. And the products are not permitted under the exemption include canned fermented foods, canned foods that require refrigeration for safety, canned acid foods, canned fruits, and low acid canned vegetables. Honey is allowed under the exemption. Honey, where the private home where the resident processes and prepares pure honey produced by their own hives. The resident can sell less than 250 gallons of honey annually, and the resident does not process or sell other foods in addition to the honey, except as allowed under the exemption, like such as a low-risk food or an acidified food. The honey must be processed in your own private home. Infused honey products would not fall under the exemption as they are considered value-added honey products, not pure honey. And I believe that there was a question in the Q&A about that. So if you're doing any kind of infused honey, you do need to apply for a permit. The product is labeled processed and prepared without state inspection. Warning, do not feed honey to infants under 1 year old. In addition, the exemption does not preclude the need for standard labeling information on the product label, such as the name of the product, the net weight statement, name and address of the manufacturer, and the list of ingredients and sub-ingredients, and possibly nutritional information as well. So where you can sell your honey is currently there is no restriction regarding where honey can be sold and who it may be sold to. Labeling. These 4 items need to be on the label: the statement of identity, the common name of the product, the ingredient list, including sub-ingredients and allergens, listed in the order from the most heaviest to the least heaviest, the name and address of the manufacturer, packer, or distributor, and the net quantity statement in standard and in metric units. We have an example here of what a label would look like, and we have the QR reader here linked as well as our information on our website. Labeling is something that Rochelle was mentioning earlier. There are a lot of regulations for it, and it does take some time to get proficient at it. So please email them to us before you go to print. Next slide, please. Allergen labeling. When an allergen is included as an ingredient, the common key allergen word must be included on the label in the ingredient statement or as an allergen contains statement. The key allergen words for the 8 common allergens are milk, wheat, eggs, peanuts, tree nuts, but you need to name that specific type of tree nut, soybean, fish, and again, you need to name that specific type of fish, and crustaceous shellfish. So here are 2 examples of how you may do that. On the left is the allergen listed in the ingredient statement. And then on the right is in the contain statement. So I will call out butter. It is on the left. And if you take a look at butter, in parentheses, it's cream, but it's milk. Milk is the allergen. Nutritional labeling. So Section 403 of the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act requires that packaged food and dietary supplements bear nutritional labeling unless they qualify an exemption. The exemption is based on the number of employees and the products sold. So the exemption is if there are fewer than 100 employees or the products fewer than 100,000 units. The number of employees is based on the average number of full-time equivalent employees, and no exemption may be taken if a company has more than the number of employees listed, regardless of the number of units produced. If a company has less than 10 employees, the products are less than 10,000 units sold, there is no need to file for an exemption. And on the right here is an example of the nutrition fact labeling. Next slide. So preparing to go to the market. When you're heading to the market, make sure that you have purchased your food from an approved food source. And as mentioned earlier by Jessica, that is someplace that is inspected regularly by the regulatory authority. Make sure you're keeping your time temperature control for safety food at or below 41 degrees Fahrenheit when it is transporting. You can use a cooler with an ice or a refrigerated truck. Use a thermometer to ensure that the cooler or the truck is at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or colder. And please keep your transportation vehicle clean. Temperature control for food, for temperature control for safety food. Cold holding is 41 degrees Fahrenheit or colder. Hot holding is 135 degrees Fahrenheit or hotter. Use a probe style thermometer to check the internal temperature of your TCS foods. You can keep a display thermometer in coolers, and ice or electrical/gas power equipment may be used provided acceptable temperatures can be achieved. Using ice for food storage, ice and ice packs may be used for temperature control for cold items, provided that acceptable temperatures are achieved, which is 41 degrees Fahrenheit or colder. The ice needs to be drained frequently, and except for fruits and vegetables, you do not store your food directly in contact with the ice. You're going to need to have it in some sort of container. Recommendations is to always bring an extra cooler full of ice or ice packs just for that ice and ice packs to replenish throughout the day. Provide a picture of your menu or your items to put on top of your cooler so your customers know what you're offering for sale, so they don't have to constantly open that cooler. And for food items that are held outside of the cooler that are for display only, those items need to be discarded at the end of the day. Protecting your food at the market. Store your food and equipment in a clean, dry location where it's not exposed to splash, dust, or other contaminants. There is no bare hand contact with food, so you'll need to use gloves or deli paper or some sort of tongs. You need to protect your food from other customers, so keep it covered or use a sneeze guard, and keep your equipment clean. Have some sort of overhead cover or even a ground cover as well. On the left here, we do have a QR reader for guidelines for providing safe food samples at markets, including the link to it. Best practices for providing sampling at markets is to try and do your prep before you get to the market. Set up a hand wash station, so it's a water dispenser, a catch basin, soap, paper towels. Make sure you're using tongs, deli paper, toothpicks, etc. to provide the sample to the customer, and you use clean utensils and equipment. We do recommend you bringing extra equipment or set up a warewashing station for wash, rinse, sanitize. Time temperature control for safety food should be either kept 41 degrees Fahrenheit or colder or discarded after 4 hours. You need to keep food covered to prevent contamination from pests and flies, and make sure customers' employees are aware of allergens that may be in your samples. Practice good personal hygiene and cleanliness. Make sure that there is no discharge from your eyes, nose, mouth, that you're not coughing and sneezing, that you've got clean clothing on, clean or outer garments, that you've got your hair restrained in a ponytail or a baseball cap or a hairnet. There should be no smoking, eating, or drinking, and make sure that you're practicing good hand washing. There should be no fingernail polish and no jewelry on your arms or hands, with the exception of a plain wedding band. So here's an example of a hand wash station, and I know Jessica showed it to you earlier as well, but it is a cooler with a spout or a spigot. You can fill it with warm water. That spigot would be great if it's something that could be flipped on and not you have to hold it with one hand and then switch it with the other hand. It's something that the spigot can be flipped, and you have a catch basin for the wastewater. You have soap, paper towels, and a trash can with it too. For setting up for the 3-basin sink for warewashing at the market, it's a 3-step process. So it is water and detergent is the first step for washing. You would need a clean rinse water to get the soap off before putting it into the third compartment, which is water and bleach. And it's about 2 teaspoons of bleach per gallon per water. And then from there, you would air dry and use your product. So the 3-basin sink is required if you've got any kind of equipment that needs to be washed, rinsed, and sanitized while you are there. If you're sanitizing on site, there are sanitizers that you can use. They need to be approved for use with sanitizing food contact surfaces and used accordance to the manufacturer's instructions. There are test strips that are available to measure and ensure that you have the appropriate concentration of the sanitizer. So the top picture is just plain chlorine bleach, and that would be used at 50 to 100 parts per million. And on the bottom is quaternary ammonium. Those are little tablets that you would use between 200 and 400 parts per million. And again, as per the manufacturer's instructions. On our website, the Virginia Department of Agriculture Consumer Services website, we're organized into 4 regions. So we have our Southwest, our Central, our Northern Virginia region, and the Tidewater region. We have the addresses there and the contact information where you can call each of the regions. Food safety program on our website, and this is the QR reader to our website. Our website has an awful lot of information on there, not in addition to the applications that Rochelle was talking about earlier in our how-to guides of how to fill out the applications. But we also keep a list of our permitted firms. We call that our firm inventory. So if you are a market manager and you're wondering if somebody is permitted through the Virginia Department of Agriculture, you can go to our firm inventory, and this is updated quite regularly. They are listed by county, and you can see who we regularly know is inspected and permitted on our list. We also have information on their most recent inspection reports there too. Next slide, please. So our food safety program, we have food safety at vdax.virginia.gov, and we are happy to answer questions. If you want to email them there, I do see that there's some questions in the chat. This is our contact information for me, Karen Bergen, and Rochelle Bland, my partner. And thank you for allowing us to join you today and to share our information.
Karen and Rochelle, thank you very much. I assume everybody's heads are spinning with all of the great information we've gotten so far. We do have quite a few questions in the chat, so I'm going to let you guys go ahead and start to answer those, and then we'll circle back after our next 2 presentations and ask anything that is left live, if that works for you all.
Sounds good. And then I wanted to really quickly add for our Q&A, we do have one of our regional managers, Elaine Beiser, and one of our technical specialists, Megan Music. They are in the Q&A answering you guys as well. So if you don't see me and Karen, but you see Elaine and Megan, it's all VDAX. We're just trying to get a lot of coverage because we typically have a lot of cottage law questions. So
yes, there are quite a few regarding cottage law, pickles, and acidified products. Go figure. So if you guys could jump on those. And Jessica and Whitney, there are several questions in the chat for you guys too. So if y'all wouldn't mind answering those, I would greatly appreciate it. Next, we are going to, thank you all so much. I appreciate you. Next, we're going to hear from Eric Bungo regarding produce safety. Eric is with VDAX, Virginia Department of Agriculture Consumer Services, produce safety. So Eric, you're
All
up.
right. Thank you, Kim, and good morning, everybody. Appreciate the invite. So, you just heard from VDH, and you also heard from VDAX, the food safety program. There's another program also within the Office of Dairy and Foods called the Produce Safety Program that started in late 2016, early 2017 to address produce grown on farms that is ready to eat, and it does not require cook or kill steps. So this is the Produce Safety Program, and I'll kind of give you all an update of what we've been doing. Okay, Kim, does that look good on your end?
Yes, you are
All right,
good. Thank you.
All right, so our map, okay, so you can see from our map here kind of where you're located in the county, and I would suggest, if you have any questions, send them my way, and you'll see at the end an email address. But we've broken down the state to three areas. We have the top area. Number one is kind of the pink area covered by Nicole Salinas. She's a new inspector, started with us back in August of last year, and replaced Kenneth Payne. Now in the yellow area, we have Cynthia Mohan that lives in Chesterfield and covers everything pretty much east. And then in the purple area, we have Christina Banks, who lives in Carroll County and covers that giant area in the southwest. So the produce safety rule, like I said, is kind of new, and we've seen a lot of foodborne illness outbreaks over the years, going back to the 90s, associated with fresh produce, and a lot of it's been, water issues on the farms. So when they developed this, they took 6 key requirements and looked at, what can we look at to see, and what are some of the big red flags where produce can become contaminated? So we look at agricultural water and how it's being used on the farm and where it's coming from. Biological soil amendments, if they're treated, untreated, or if there's a raw manure or human waste being used. Sprouts are also under the produce safety rule. We have domesticated and wild animals in the fields, worker training, health and hygiene. So the people that are doing the harvesting in the fields, and the farm migrant and labor camp, and the H-2A workers. And then also the equipment, tools, and buildings. So the packing shed, anything you're using during the harvesting and packing process. So with our program, again, a lot of this stuff is previously covered under GAPS, or good agricultural practices. But our goal is to educate farmers and gain voluntary compliance by, educate while we regulate approach with this new law. So does every produce farm in Virginia need to be inspected? And the answer is no. So produce inspections are mandatory for any covered farm or operation that grows, harvests, forages, or packs covered produce under the rule. And you'll see I have in here forages that applies to ramps, mushrooms, dandelion greens, anything like that. Sprout inspections, we conduct those jointly with the FDA. And then coverage under the rule and whether or not you need an inspection is determined by a 3-year gross sales average and a threshold as dictated by inflation. And we'll go over that in a couple slides here. We have a decision tree that shows the coverage and exemptions. You can find that at that link there. And then I have on here a disclaimer that any farm, even if you are exempt, can request an inspection if you so choose to. There are no costs for our inspections. With the third-party audits and the GAP audits, you're paying sometimes hundreds and thousands of dollars for those audits. But for us, there's no cost with the VDAC's produce safety inspection. So even if you are exempt or micro exempt or qualified exempt, you can still have that inspection completed on your farm. So here's the flow chart I was talking about. And what we're seeing here the past few years, and especially the past 12 months, is that people are sort of starting at the bottom of the flow chart, with the whole QE block in blue. But you really have to start at the beginning here and walk through this to see if you're covered or not under the law. So the first question here is, does your farm grow, harvest, pack, or hold produce? And if the answer is yes, then you kind of proceed to the next part. Does your farm on average have 25,000 or less in annual produce sales? If the answer is no, you kind of continue to the next section. If you are under $25,000 in annual, again, produce sales, so that's all the produce commodities that you grow, you're what's called micro excluded or micro exempt. The next section, is your produce one of the commodities the FDA has identified as rarely consumed raw? So in the law, FDA has specifically identified, certain commodities called RCR commodities that typically require cooking before consumption. So good example would be pumpkin, sweet potatoes, regular like russet potatoes and stuff like that. So again, not covered by the rule because the hazard there is mitigated through the cook step. If we answer a no to this question, let me back up a bit. If you grow in a produce commodity and it's not listed here, it's likely covered under the law. Okay, we had a question earlier this morning that came in by phone prior to the webinar about somebody growing crocus plants and wanted to harvest the stamens for saffron. So again, since it's not listed as an RCR commodity, it is treated as a covered commodity. Okay, that herb and that flower. Going to the next section, is your produce for personal or on-farm consumption? Okay, if the answer is yes, If nothing leaves the farm, if nothing enters commerce and goes out to the consumer, then you are not covered, all right? If, however, it does go out there, then likely, yes, you are covered. Is your produce intended for commercial processing? All right, so if you're growing tomatoes for canning or wine for grapes for wine, then again, there's some sort of kill step there. There's really no concern with pathogens and bacteria. Again, so you're likely excluded from the law under the commercial processing exemption. However, if you answer no, you drop down to the next section, okay? And this is the qualified exempt piece. And this again has created a lot of confusion out there in the state of Virginia as well as nationwide. So does your farmer on average, okay, you have to take a 3-year average, have less than $500,000 in annual food sales, all right? And I'll pause here and say that food is anything for humans, animals, chewing gum. This could be produce that you're turning into jams and jellies, pumpkin butter, anything that Rochelle and Karen talked about or Whitney talked about, okay? Again, those are considered food sales, and you have to account for that in your $500,000. And as the majority of that food sold directly to qualified end users. And it kind of defines here, what is an end user? Is the consumer of the food or a restaurant or retail food establishment. So retail food establishment in the food code means a grocery store, convenience store, restaurant, and stuff like that, right? So as long as you meet all these definitions here, you're less than 500K in food sales, you could be eligible for a qualified exemption. And with that, you're required to keep records. If you answer no to this question, you've made it all the way through the decision tree, you do need an inspection by our program and you are covered by the rule. All right, so what is covered? All right, and these are some examples, highlighted stuff in yellow that we see a lot in the state of Virginia. Apples, blueberries, cabbage, cantaloupes, cherries, cucumbers, green beans, herbs, kale, all your greens, peaches, peppers, plums, strawberries, tomatoes, spinach, and watermelons. Some of the other stuff we'll see sporadically, but these are the primary things we see on a regular basis. So all records required by the produce safety rule must contain certain info, okay? The name and the location of the farm. So if you're keeping a record about employee training or ag water usage, you have to have all this on there. The actual values and observations obtained during monitoring, the date and time the activity was documented, an adequate description of the covered produce, a lot number or type. It has to be created at the time an activity is performed or observed. So if you're checking the sanitizer concentration in a flume or a dump tank, it has to be dated and signed or initialed by the person who performed the activity. And one of the big observations we're seeing right now by inspectors is these records are not being reviewed. So they have to be reviewed, dated, and signed within a reasonable time. And that reasonable time is up for you to determine, whether that's weekly, monthly, after the records are made by a supervisor or responsible party on the farm. So that's sort of that secondary check in that process. So if you want to be eligible for the qualified exemption, you have to establish and keep a record that you performed that annual review and verification that you are less than $500,000 in annual food sales, and you are selling to mostly end users. And 2, the records necessary to demonstrate that your farm satisfies that criteria. Again, here's kind of what we just talked about. So what is a qualified end user? Again, an example would be a farm stand, a farmer's market. So a lot of you on the call here, commodity supported agriculture customers, stuff like that. It does not include distributors, repack centers, wholesalers, produce auctions, food hubs, and it does not include restaurants or retailers outside of the 275-mile radius. All right. So if you're selling this to a produce auction or to an aggregator, that is not considered a qualified end user. You may have seen our postcard around before or not. We try to hand these out in all the trade shows and events that we go to. And does your farm grow fruits or vegetables? If so, we ask you please register your farm with the produce safety program. Kim, I know you've seen this before, and thank you for helping us advertise this. We greatly appreciate it. Again, you create the free account. It links your farm in our database to what you do, and you can apply for a registration and an exemption. We share our information with the Virginia Grown program. However, their website is going through some updates. You can also print out a certificate, for that registration and exemption piece. Here's what the certificate of registration looks like. It has my signature on it, the Virginia Grown logo, the VDAX logo. It'll have your farm name on there once you complete it. And you can print out the certificate on your own. It's a PDF once you complete the registration process. Next to the exemption certificate, okay, so if you are qualified exempt or micro exempt, okay, number one, you want to register. Number two, you want to apply for that exemption. And you have to do that on an annual basis. So in the database, you will get a 30-day reminder prior to your exemption expiring, and we ask that you log back in and renew if it still applies. All right. So again, if you are a vendor at a farmer's market, you should be able to show, number one, a certificate of registration, and either number two, a certificate exemption, or number three, an inspection report. So education and outreach, during the winter months, we do a lot of trade shows, we go to field days, and really what we've been trying to do the past 12 months is educate farmers about the changes to what's called Subpart E and the ag water requirements that FDA has made. We work with growers on FDA-funded research studies. There's a lot being done right now with cucumbers and leafy greens. We visit farmers markets in the spring and summer, share information with them and the growers and that might be present. And we also help direct farms to the marketing and promotion services that are within our agency. So the Virginia Grown Program and the Ag and Forestry Industry Development Grants. Education and training. So if you are covered under the rule, one person from your farm must take and complete food safety training as successfully recognized by the FDA. To date, there's only one approved training, and that is the Produce Safety Alliance Grower Training class out of Cornell University. Laura Strawn for Virginia Tech teaches this class for us in Virginia. She's the lead trainer. And then if you're doing sprouts, you have to take the Sprout Safety Alliance Grower Training course. So I will tell you, coming up May 5th and 6th, this is the last date. You can attend this course at a discounted rate. So in the previous 4 years, actually 9 years, we've been giving a subaward or grant to Virginia Tech to teach these courses and reduce the cost. With all the grants being cut by the federal government recently, we do not have that money to share around next year, starting July 1. So the last class Laura's doing is May 5th and 6th at a cost of $50 per person. After that, she has indicated that she will likely still do the classes, but because there's no subsidized funding, the cost will increase to $150 to $250 per person. Again, please contact her if you've not taken this course and you're interested and get in that last class there. We are seeing that Cornell, if you go to their website, advertising classes in upwards of $400. So again, please take advantage of this. Workshops, we've been doing some cleaning and sanitizing workshops for the growers in Virginia to talk about, you know, what does cleaning mean? What does sanitizing mean? What are approved sanitizers for use in the produce industry? What are some testing methods and monitoring methods? What kind of paperwork do I need? We held one last March in Richmond. We had another one on December 16th up in the Winchester area. And we're looking at doing a third one later this year, likely either in Richmond or Virginia Beach. So please stay tuned for that. Inspections. Okay, so we started doing inspections of the large farms in May of 2019, and then kind of the tiers kind of rolled into effect. The small farms in 2020 and the very small farms in 2021. So in fiscal year 2023, we did 114 inspections. In 24, 95 inspections. In 25, so far we've done 75 inspections. And if y'all are familiar with the fiscal year, it ends June 30th. So we're hoping to be in the hundreds here by June 30th of this year. Out of all those inspections we've done, almost 300 inspections, only one farm has had egregious conditions where we've had to issue a letter of warning, all right? And a letter of warning is the first step in our compliance process before we get to civil penalties. So this farm had a migrant labor camp. They were growing cilantro and the workers were kind of defecating in the stream and adjacent to the field. It was very obvious. So they got a letter of warning for that, you know, because we did not want that to get onto the ready-to-eat cilantro. Out of all these inspections, the top three observations that we're seeing on a trend-wise are inadequate or lack of training. Either the management has not taken the produce safety class, or they have not taken that training and further, you know, train their employees like they need to. Record keeping either not being done or not being reviewed by the supervisor, or it's not in the proper format. It doesn't have all the required name and dates and addresses and reviews. And then equipment, tools, and buildings, either they're not of adequate design, they're not installed or maintained properly. So if you look at our inspection data, kind of what we're looking at, if you break it down by all the inspections we've done in fiscal year 24, again, we're showing that the major demerits are in subpart C, which is record keeping and training. And then we have L, equipment, tools, and buildings. Some more L in record keeping, and then O is also records. So you may want to ask, how does Virginia stack up nationally? You look at the trends nationally in fiscal year 23 for year 2. Unfortunately, I don't have fiscal year 24 yet, but you kind of see the same things. In the beginning, you have C, L, and O, and you're seeing the same thing, C, L, and O across the nation. So Virginia, we're pretty much on par with what the FDA and other states are seeing when they do their inspections. Some of the big things FDA has asked us to look at recently is they're kind of taking a study and doing where do pathogens originate from, and how did produce get contaminated in the first place? Was it through water, soil amendments, wildlife, domestic animals, soil and dust, and people? They're looking at wind and also weather events as issues that create foodborne illness outbreaks. So again, they're asking the questions, and they want us to ask these questions when we're doing our inspections. Also, they want us to talk to the farmer about what's going on around your farm, and being mindful of, are there streams nearby? Are there cattle pastures upstream, landfills close by, anything, other human activities, animals, anything that could contaminate the produce on your farm? Again, they're asking us to be mindful of and to ask you questions. So again, please be familiar with what's going on your property. So when we do these inspections, not all observations are noted as violations on the inspection report. Okay, the inspector will likely have several items for discussion with you as the person in charge. We'll discuss these issues and concerns and talk with the farm manager. They will be documented at the end of the report under a section called discussion with management. However, anything that's major that could cause a foodborne illness, we're going to mark it as an observation. Okay, and you'll see here number 45, record keeping. That box will be checked, and at the end it'll have kind of what the issue was. If nothing is checked as an observation, you'll have some comments in here such as discuss the need to monitor wildlife with the farm manager, or discuss the need to add a hand washing sign at the hand washing, stuff like that. I added this slide in here this year because we get this confused a lot by industry. What's the difference between a VDAX inspection and a gap audit? So inspections are mandatory for any covered farm under the FDA's produce safety rule, and there are no charges to the grower. Gap audits, on the other hand, are voluntarily and market driven by grocers and buyers. So this is industry requirement. There's fees associated with these audits, and they can get rather expensive. So if you want to sell to Whole Foods, Walmart, Wegmans, typically they'll require a harmonized gap audit, a gap plus audit, some type of third-party audit to get you. Again, it's their standard. They want you to meet their standard to get into the marketplace. All right, a little bit different. That's under USDA. So the state and the FDA inspector, we do the produce safety rule inspections under the FDA, and the USDA or the state equivalent also conducts the gap audits. A food safety plan is required for a gap audit. We do not require that on our side, but both require a significant amount of record keeping. There's a link to a document here that AFTO did, which is the Association of Food Drug Officials, explaining furthermore the differences in all the different subparts, for those. Inspection reports and inspection certificates. All right. On the left, you'll see this is the first page of our inspection report. They're 5 pages long. So if you do receive an inspection at the end, the inspector should issue this inspection report. All right. You'll be able to show that to farmers market managers, restaurants, retailers to help market your produce. In addition to that, what we've been working on, and I'm happy to announce, again, Kim, I think your group's the first to hear about this, is a new certificate of inspection. So we're hearing a lot of these small growers, these very small growers, okay, they really want to try and get into the marketplace. They don't want to have these gap audits because they cost a lot of money. So what can we do for them? All right. We've created what's called a certificate of inspection. So in addition to getting the inspection report on the left, you also get a certificate kind of on the right. Again, this is just a preliminary format. It might be a little bit more fancy, but it basically will say that, this produce farm was inspected on such and such date and time by VDAX, the produce program in accordance with the Virginia produce safety law. It's going to be issued by the inspector, have their signature and a date. So again, we're hoping you guys will be interested in this. If you have questions, please let me know. Again, and like I said, if you are a micro exempt farm or qualified exempt farm and you want this inspection and you want this certificate, we can get you on our list and do those inspections. Ag water, I'm just going to touch on this real quickly. I deleted a bunch of the more technical stuff, but I want to give you a quick overview. This is really hot right now across the nation. FDA has significantly changed the ag water requirements for farms, and they finalized a lot of the dates this past year. So what's the difference? FDA has divided it up and made it a little bit more confusing than the way it used to read. So they've broken that out into pre-harvest and post-harvest. So pre-harvest is anything that touches the crop prior to it being harvested. So you have your overhead sprinklers, sprays, micro sprays, drip irrigation, furrows, floods. We don't see a lot of that in Virginia. Sub irrigation, anything used as pesticide, herbicides, crop sprays, water. So again, where's your water being used out on the farm pre-harvest? Post-harvest is more like your dump tanks, flumes, cooling water, wash water that you're using on the farm with the produce. So again, a little bit of a difference there, and there's different risks associated with each type of water usage and where we are at in the process. So for pre-harvest ag water, FDA has stated that all large farms, so if you are greater than $500,000 in annual sales, you must comply by April 7th of this year, so just 2 or 3 weeks ago. However, NASDA, which is the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, and Virginia, we've taken the stance that we're going to give all these farms a 1-year grace period, right? So again, taking that educate while we regulate approach. So again, while we're on the farm, ask us questions about pre-harvest ag water, all right? You're going to want to get this straight before the compliance date hits next April. The thought process then is for the small business and very small businesses, we'll also do that 1-year rolling grace period as well. So again, you can use this QR code here. Again, these changes were published on May 6th of 2024. So a little less than a year ago. And it removes the reliance on testing because they were asking everybody to test their water sources and have so many tests per year and do a geometric mean. It was kind of confusing. It was going to be very expensive. So now they want the farmers to make an assessment on the water on their farm. Where's the water coming from? How is it being used? Really look at all those risks and how you can mitigate those risks. So you have to do an ag water assessment, sort of like a HACCP plan for your farm. So that was pre-harvest. Now we're going to move into the harvest and post-harvest. Okay, right now, large farms and small farms must comply with the harvest and post-harvest ag water requirements. The very small farms, again, have a grace period until January of next year. And then, like I said, this is all your wash water and stuff that's used after the produce is harvested from the field. Here's a good example, right? So we're going to ask you, what is this water being used for? Maybe you're washing squash in here. Maybe you're washing cucumbers in here to get the dirt off of it from the field. These are some reusable bins. This tub, unfortunately, does not have any sanitizer in it. So you can think of it as kind of a bacterial soup, and you're just kind of contaminated everything that this water touches. All right. So again, being mindful of what's going on the farm. Some quick links to some fact sheets here. FDA does have an ag water assessment builder online, and they have a paper-based tool in Spanish as well. Here's our website, vaproducesafety.com. At the end of the website is my contact information. We also have a lot of good resources out here, and we'll be making some updates to that. And we'll be sending out a newsletter here, hopefully by May 1st, to all the farms that are registered in our portal with some helpful updates. Kim, that's all I have.
Thank you. You have several questions in the chat, so I will let you jump on those. I would like for you to specifically address, because I have seen confusion on the farmers market side regarding labeling for produce, which is different than the labeling requirements for prepared foods or the foods and all the products that fall under Rochelle and Karen and Whitney, et cetera. Could you spend a moment to address that also, please?
Yeah, sure. Sure thing. And I will tell you, I'll make it rather easier for you all. Labeling is covered in the Virginia food laws. Okay, like Rochelle and Karen talked about, there's a section called misbranding in the food laws. Okay, and I don't remember the citation code for it, but talks about, if a food is in package form, what all labeling has to be in there, right? So for us, in package form is if it's an enclosed container or bag. If you have an open bag of grapes or an open bag of apples, kind of with the handles on the sides, that is not a closed container, all right? Once you kind of have that zip top where you put a sticker across it and close it, it's a packaged food, all right? So for the Virginia food laws, it has 4 things in there. Okay, number 1, what the commodity is, the common name of the commodity. Number 2, what the ingredients are in order of predominance by weight. Okay, and the sub ingredients. We don't need that for produce, right? So a lot of the times, again, you're looking at just carrots or just cucumbers or just bite-sized tomatoes, right? So again, we're not requiring an ingredient statement, and there should not be one on there for whole produce. All right, number 3 is the name and address of the farm. We do require that. A website or a phone number is in addition to that basic requirement. And number 4 is the net weight of the declaration of content, so a net weight statement. So net weight in ounces and grams of the contents of that package, right? So again, it's the same food law. Again, the food program and the produce program and the dairy program are all within the Office of Dairy and Foods, and the Virginia food law is all encompassing within the agency. So that's kind of where we stick our labeling authority.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I know that we get some confusion because labels are different. Yes, you have to label, but your label is maybe different than what somebody is labeling cheese or what somebody is labeling chicken salad, etc., or poultry. So I appreciate you addressing that.
Yep.
I'll go ahead and let you tackle a couple of the questions that are in the Q&A. And then we're going to hear now from Gary Milton with Weights and Measures, and then we'll have time to ask additional questions live at the end as all these folks are staying on. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Gary, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you. My name is Gary Milton. I represent the Office of Weights and Measures within VDAX. Here today, I'm going to have 4 topics. I'm going to kind of breeze over those and kind of give you what they are. If I can get my screen to move. Here we go.
Yeah.
All right. These are types of sale, methods of sale, labeling, and the one we get the most questions on are scales. So I'm going to touch on these 4 topics today. First one, types of sale. We look at direct sale versus prepackaged sale. Direct sales are products that are weighed, counted, or at the time of sale, these items usually sold from bulk, and the consumer may select a product. Prepackaged sales are those where the product is weighed, packaged with the quantity or prior to the sale displayed, then the customer can select the package. And just a couple of examples on the left, you'll see a direct sale where there are apples, which can either be sold by weight, count, or measure. And then on the right, you see packages of product that have a label on them that these have been weighed prior to display for sale. A couple of more things on this. Direct sales, there's no label required. Items may be sold by weight, count, volume, or measure. And if they are weighed, then the scales must be compliant with the regulations. And I'll touch on that a little bit more later. Prepackaged items, again, these are items that are in a container or some form of package. Label is required. They must contain the stated net weight or net quantity. And if they're sold by weight, the tare must be deducted from that total weight. And again, under types of sale, tare weight, that's any wrapper or tray, anything that is not part of the commodity in itself is contained. It holds the item or protects the item, but then that weight is not a sellable weight. Then that weight must be deducted prior to the sale. The tare weight must be conducted. So the only stated net weight on that product. And this is from our Virginia Code of Virginia, how certain commodities are to be sold. So these in liquid form shall be sold by liquid measure or by weight. When commodities not in liquid form can be sold by weight, measure, count. And then it lists some specific commodities in there that may be sold, such as vegetables sold by head or bunch. Also, on the method of sale, the Code of Virginia refers to the Uniform Regulation for Method of Sale of Commodities. This is adopted by the National, it should be Council on Weights and Measures now, it's NCWM, and published in the National Institute of Standards and Technology Handbook 130 under Uniform Laws and Regulations. And this is method of sale, and I'll show you a couple of screenshots from the method of sale in the handbook. A lot of times we get questions on, can I sell my product by this method? You can, contact us and we can research to see what the commodity is and how it can be sold. And these are a couple of excerpts from the handbook, and just point out, say like, these are specific vegetables or commodities. Say Brussels sprouts, you'll see if they're loose, they must be sold by weight. But if they're on stalk, then they can be sold by the head or bunch. So these are for specific commodities to be sold. Then we have commodity groups. You'll see like berries or cherry grape tomatoes may be sold by weight or dry measure. Labeling. And you've heard a lot this morning on labeling and how items are to be labeled, specific items. So what the Office of Weights and Measures requires is probably more of a bare minimum on labels if they're not included in any other office. And this again comes from the Code of Virginia, 3.25623. And it says that they, in a nutshell, must be have an identity, a quantity, and then a responsibility statement. Who's responsible? Also, again, this refers over into the Handbook 130. And for uniform regulation of packaging and labeling, and has some specific terms there for the labeling of those products. And just generally, declaration of identity, what is the product, a declaration of quantity, how much product is there, weight, volume, or count, and then the declaration of responsibility is who's produced or is responsible for the product. Well, further information on declaration of identity appears on the principal display panel, and that's the part of the panel that's most likely to be seen or displayed so the customer can see it. And if the name is specified by federal or state regulation, use that, or either common name or generic name as appropriate. Like it said again, some offices have specific requirements as far as labeling as identity. Declaration of quantity usually appears in the lower 30% of the display panel. Prominent, can it be read and understood, and tells you how much product is in it, whether it's weight, quantity, or measure, weight, count, or measure must be in there. And then declaration of responsibility. It's displayed on packages, kept, offered, or exposed for sale or sold at a location other than where packed. Some at a farmer's market may be packing and displaying behind the counter. There they can be displayed and only have the quantity and the identity on them, that they do not have to have the responsibility statement since it's packed on those premises. Should include, if it does have that declaration of responsibility, actual name of the business, information on the address and where the business is. So if somebody needs to get in contact, they can certainly get in contact. Last, we'll move on to scales. This is where we, like I say, we get the most questions. Scales for direct sales and commercial trade must be legal for trade. And that means they must meet certain standards set forth by the National Council on Weights and Measures and certified by a national type evaluation program. They're a class 3 scale, and they'll have an identification plate with the serial number and manufacturer's name, model number, and some other information on it. A lot of times we get questions on scales. You know, I've got a set of kitchen scales. Can I use those? Generally, they are not legal for trade because they haven't gone through the in-depth process, the evaluation process. That's a very rigorous process and an expensive process. So most of these other type scales don't go through that process. Again, from the Code of Virginia, specific regulations pertaining to those scales, they're found in National Institute of Standard Technology Handbook 44, which we adopt in its entirety. So that covers the requirements for those scales to be used. And from NIST handbook, just a couple of items. These are commercial scales. It tells you the specifications, and others apply to commercial weighing and measuring equipment. Suitability of equipment. Make sure if you buy a set of scales, the scales are used for what they are intended to be used. Again, identification of the equipment. This is on the, after it goes through the in-depth process, this is on the certificate of conformance and should be a label on the scale with all of this information. And one thing to be sure of, if you're using a scale for direct sale, it needs to be positioned so the customer can see the reading on that scale. Again, class 3 scales pretty much tells you any scale used in those commercial transactions will be class 3. And then scales, we get a lot of questions on scales. Where can I get scales? You can contact a registered service agency. They are registered with the Office of Weights and Measures, and they can sell and place into service scales, or you can purchase scales elsewhere. We have a lot of people that purchase scales over the internet. I would caution you, if you're looking at a set of scales that you want to purchase, please contact our office. We can look up to see whether those scales have a certificate of conformance or they're legal for trade. Sometimes people will purchase a cheap set of scales and then find out those scales cannot be used. So just be sure to contact us if you're looking at something, or to make sure that it has a certificate of conformance with it. And that's where I'll open up for questions.
Thank you, Gary. A couple of questions that come up often regarding weights and measures, which you touched on, but I'm going to ask you to explain a little bit more. Direct sale versus prepackaged. I see baskets of, for example, chicken feet used as dog treats, and there may be a sign that says 75 cents a chicken foot. My understanding is that's not appropriate. It needs to actually be packaged and labeled, correct? Either it needs to be sold bulk.
Those need to be sold by weight. That was a couple of years ago in the National Conference on Weights and Measures, a regulation change, and pet treats are to be sold by weight.
Okay, so pet treats need to be sold by weight.
Yes.
And can you also talk about how often do scales need to be inspected?
We do not have a mandatory time frame within Virginia for inspection. Our office runs about a 21, 22-month cycle on scales. I suggest that if you're using scales, commercial application, especially for farmers markets, I would suggest at least an annual test and inspection because those scales can weigh under or weigh over it equally. So to keep from cheating someone and yourself especially, be sure to have your scales checked. A registered service agent can do that. We do work in cooperation with a lot of farmers markets where they may have a scale day, which the vendors are invited to bring the scales in, and our inspectors will set up to go test in those scales. So usually in the spring, we're pretty busy trying to get that done. But at other times, don't hesitate to contact our office. I'll share one more slide with our contact information. So feel free to contact our office and we will set up to have someone take a look.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I highly encourage every farmers market manager that's on this call to set up as part of your vendor kickoff to have weights and measures come out and check to be a part of your vendor kickoff to be able to calibrate scales, or have them set up a vendor time prior to market opening for the scales to be inspected. Just have everybody come. Weights and Measures does that, as Gary said. Quite often, it is the best way to get all the scales inspected and certified, and as well as it's free for the vendors to do it that way. So I appreciate that. Can all scales be calibrated? That's one of the questions that we have here.
It can be calibrated, probably so, but it would depend on the scale. But then, like I said, we get back to the question: can those scales be legal for trade?
Okay.
That's the big question. Those that come with a certificate of performance are legal for trade, and they can be calibrated. Others may be calibrated, but they may not be legal for trade.
And I know Gary was dancing around it because he can't promote one scale or another, but I have seen a lot of folks that have gone on Amazon, for example, to look for scales. Some of those qualify and some don't. So please, owm@vdax.virginia.gov will tell you before you invest the money. All you got to do is just shoot them the link and say, is this a compliant scale? And they will let you know. I brought up the question regarding chicken feet for pet treats, and we kind of skimmed over the answer. And I've gotten several folks have dropped it in the chat. Would you please go over that again regarding the requirements for chicken feet for pet treats?
For any of the pet treats must be sold by weight.
Okay, so being necks, all of that would be the same.
Yes.
Okay. What about chew toys? Things that are being sold as chew toys. That's a toy versus a food?
That, I would say if it's not labeled as a treat, probably is a bit different. But again, I would have to dig a little information on that one. But my guess is if it's a toy versus a treat, that differentiates it there.
Okay. All right. And I highly encourage you again regarding your labels, because I have seen this over and over again. Pretty much if your product is packaged, it needs to have a label on it, but depending on what that product is, depends on what that label needs to read. So go to that specific department and work with them. They are more than happy to help you do it right versus you spending money and then finding out that your labels are wrong. Eric, I also had a couple of questions for you, and I'm just going to ask if you can send me, folks would like the information on the Virginia Tech class that you mentioned. I'm trying to find it in the chat now. I'm sorry. And if you could send that to me, and we will send that in the email, as well as they were asking for the flyer for that you mentioned for the Produce Alliance. And I'm sorry, maybe somebody answered it. Yeah. But if you could send that to me also, I am happy to include that link in the email also.
Yeah, Kim, I answered that question, and
Did
can
you?
send it
Oh,
to
good. That's why I don't see it. Thank you.
Yeah, they're both the same. It's the same class for both questions there. So I'll
Okay,
send it to you and you can share it.
Oh, perfect. So we have a few more minutes and we've got a captive audience with our presenters. So what questions do you have? Drop them in the chat that you specifically want to ask that hasn't been covered today for these topics. Tomorrow, we're going over CBD hemp. We're going over pet food tomorrow. We're going over dairy. We're going over meat and poultry. And then on Wednesday, we will have nursery services here talking about if you want to sell plants, things of that sort, pollinators. We'll have fire safety here, going over the regs. Virginia ABC, whether you're doing boozy products, you want to have wine tastings, kombucha, vanilla that has vodka in it, those will be answered there. And then our anchor, as always, will be the Cooperative Extension, and they will talk about all the amazing programs that they do in order to um, uh, certify your acidified products, the different classes that they offer, et cetera, and the tools and resources they have to be able to help. So we've got a couple of more minutes here. Well, we've got 30 minutes here. What questions do you have? So we have a question that says, can we reshare what produce can be sold by either weight, count, or measure?
That can be shared. And if you would like, Kim, I can send you a copy of that so you can have to post in.
That would be perfect.
Okay, I'll send you a copy of the specific vegetable list and then a commodities list.
That would be wonderful. And then on Gary's side, you have sent me the weights and measures code as it applies to farmers markets in the past. Can you send that to me again to make sure that we have the most up-to-date copy?
I'm a little, what did I say?
I know. There's like 2 pages you copy for me out of this very technical book that has the regs on like weights and measures and the signage that has to on the different information. I will look through my notes from last
If
year
you
and
would
send you
look
a
through
copy
that.
of what you sent me.
Yeah, look through that and see what it was and let me know and I will see if I can resend it.
I appreciate that. I just want to make sure I've got the most up-to-date information. All of these presentations will be provided to us. If you haven't already sent them, please do, or if you need to make some updates based on the information today, please feel free to do that. Forward to the presenters, forward the presentations to us, and we will have everything up on our website in the next 2 weeks. You are going to be able to download and or review the presentations. The entire Food Safety Summit is also going to be posted on YouTube for you to go back and review, as well as it'll be in Farmers Market University. If you're not able to take this entire class live, you can go in and take it through Farmers Market University at your own leisure, and you will take a quiz and get a certificate through the university. But again, all of these presentations will be provided, and all of the resources that they have will be provided afterwards. We have an entire food safety page. That's where it will be listed. You'll receive all of these links. What other questions do we have? I see we've got a bunch of open questions. There were a couple of questions that came in about the CSA model to add on to a market business. Do different rules apply to a CSA? Is that a VDAX or a VDA? I guess that's a VDAX question, right? Okay, we will get you an answer. We're going to be sending out the Q&A transcript also for today's meeting. We will gather all the Q&A and put it into a document and send it out. We'll get the information on the CSA. I'm not sure if that's VDAX or VDH, Jessica or Rochelle.
I think it might depend on the products they're wanting to add to the subscription model.
Okay.
Because as we went over for like the VDAX exempt foods, those have to be sold like in person. So I saw part of the question says the customers may not attend the actual market. So I think that's one that we can collaborate with offline, but it's going to depend on what the CSA is going to offer.
Right, because in order to qualify, and could you address that specifically, Rochelle, just or reiterate it regarding your eligibility to fall under cottage the cottage exemption and where you can utilize that.
Yeah. So if you're operating under the cottage exemption, you have one of the things is you have to make sure that the food is an allowable food under the exemption. And in addition to that, you have to sell your products in person in the Commonwealth to an individual for their own consumption. You can't sell it for resale, you can't sell it for consignment, can't sell it across state lines or over the internet. You have to sell it out of your private home where you made the food, at a temporary event, or at the farmer's market.
I appreciate that. So the cottage law does not apply to an online farm market or any kind of an online sales or any other type of sales. It has to be at a farmer's market where you are face to face with the customer. So for example, if you have a cottage, if you're doing a CSA that has bread in it that falls under cottage, then the customer has to be picking that up at the market from that vendor. That's going to be an interesting collaborative question. That's going to be a tough one to figure out, isn't it? Talking about, we've got several questions in here about sampling also. Can you go over sampling again? Like if you have a fruit vendor that wants to sample strawberries, or they want to sample their homemade jams. Can you talk a little bit more about sampling, as well as can you talk about what kind of packaging or anything that the sampling has to be in? And do they need hand washing sinks for that, etc.? I'm thinking this is a Whitney and Jessica question.
I was thinking this was VDAX, but I know we had some questions come up in the Q&A about USDA hamburgers, hot dogs, that kind of thing, and what they can do. And the response was that if they were going to serve those as individual patties or individual hot dogs cut up, that would be the sample. But if they're putting it with a bun that they purchased from the grocery store and making it into a sandwich or a hot dog with a bun, then that would be preparing a meal, and that would not be considered a sample, and they would need a permit for that. So hopefully that helps clear that up a little bit.
But what if they're heating it up? So they're heating up that patty or the hot dog sample.
Oh, sure. They can cook it. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, the understanding is that they're preparing the food that they produced on the farm. They can cook it, absolutely. But in terms of making it into a sandwich or a dish, that requires a permit.
Okay. I appreciate that. I haven't heard this specifically today, and I could have been answering questions and missed it, so I apologize if I'm being redundant. And this may be a VDEX question, but I understand that the regs changed for freeze-dried products. Can somebody specifically address like freeze-dried candies and freeze-dried corn, and if the corn has a spicy ranch seasoning on it, etc.? Are they now under cottage, or are they inspected products?
Yeah, so there was a similar question in the Q&A that I answered. If the food is on the exempt list for the exemption, they can freeze dry that. So
Okay.
Candies, for example, is already on the list. They can freeze dry the candies. Fruits, it's on the list. They can freeze dry the fruit. Same thing with herbs. Very interesting one though. I don't believe vegetables are on the list. I'm pretty sure it's herbs and fruits. So technically, the freeze-dried vegetables would require a permit, even though the fruits and the herbs do not.
There's a question, and I'm not sure if you answered, it's still showing open, regarding somebody that wants to sell sourdough out of a sourdough stand. Can they continue to do that under cottage law, or do they need to be permitted and inspected? So it looks like they're doing it as a sourdough stand versus, are you talking about selling this at a farmer's market or at home? I'm not sure. If you could provide us with a little additional information, we can provide that information for you. For those of you that are asking again about the presentations, yes, the entire presentations are going to be available, as well as the Q&A, and it will take us a little bit of time to get it. I think we got it done in 2 weeks last year, to verify all the information and get all of the correct information to you. Oh, so I'm sorry. Somebody said they'd like to sell sourdough out of a sourdough stand at their residence. do they need to be inspected and approved to do that?
This one may need some more collaboration on this side because the exemption specifically says that they can sell the products at their private residence, but also zoning comes into play with that. A lot of the localities will not allow like a standalone stand on your private property. You would have to like sell it, like people come knock on your door and you give it to them. So
Right.
it's not just a food safety answer, maybe a locality zoning thing that comes into play as well.
Okay. And then we have a question about dehydrated product versus freeze dried, dehydrated, sliced veggies, seasoned. What are the rules regarding selling those at market?
I think this is food safety / produce. I think we went through this. Was it with mushrooms, Kim? It's like freeze drying is different from dehydrating. I
Yes.
think Eric can confirm whether dehydrating is allowed under the produce safety rule.
Yeah, so as long as it stays as the whole commodity, right? So for mushrooms, if you're growing those mushrooms, you're cultivating them under a controlled environment or outside, then you are able to dehydrate them. Okay, not freeze dry because that requires food safety. Dehydrate either in the oven or on the counter or in dehydration. As long as they stay in their whole natural state. Once you start slicing, dicing, cutting, that turns it into a processed food, all right, which falls back to Rochelle and Karen.
Okay, so just to be specific, I can dehydrate my mushrooms and sell them in a bag at the market as dehydrated oyster mushrooms and have the proper weight and information on it, and that's okay. If I grind those up as a mushroom powder to put on steaks and things of that sort, then that's going to fall under Rochelle.
You're 100% correct.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know you presented on this, but I'm going to touch on it because I get a lot of these questions. Eric, could you please talk about foraged mushrooms and foraged products, ramps, which folks are foraging now, mushrooms, etc. Can you please just specifically address? I know you went through it in your presentation, but would you hit on it again?
Yeah, sure. So this has become again another hot topic with state produce programs across the U.S. Recently. Is the whole foraging of produce, right? So the produce safety law covers produce that is grown, harvested, packed, and sold, right? So if it's not grown and you're foraging it, it's still covered under packed and sold, right?
Yes.
There are some differences in commodities, and I'll start with the mushrooms. So wild foraged mushrooms, there's kind of two aspects to that. Number one, yes, you are able to do it for personal consumption, okay? Number two, if you want to do it for sales, you have to go through the food safety program and get on their certification list and let them know what species you are planning to forage and to harvest in the wild. So they can handle that. I believe Rochelle and Megan Music, work with that. And then if you want to sell those foraged mushrooms to other restaurants and wholesalers, you still have to go through food safety. But in addition to that, if you are over that $25,000 mark in all produce sales, you could need an inspection from our program as well. So again, that's just for the wild foraged mushrooms. It's a little bit trickier there because some of those species could cause severe illness and death. Once you start talking about ramps and dandelion greens and blueberries and stuff like that, it would still be us. We would look at it once you go over that 25K sales point.
Okay. So to further down the rabbit hole regarding freeze drying, so somebody is freeze drying mushrooms or microgreens, and they wish to take their produce to a different homesteader who does their freeze drying. Can they get their products freeze dried by a different entity to then sell as a value added product at their farmer's market? I'm not sure I'm following that question. This is a question by Nina Cotter. I'm going to let VDAX look at that and see if they can answer that. There's a question regarding, we were talking about the cottage law exemption, and I just want to circle back to that for just a moment. And somebody asked about delivery. So cottage law only applies to the in-person farmers market. So it doesn't apply to delivery. It doesn't apply to online, etc. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Nina, can you clarify your question a little bit, please? Thank you. This new platform doesn't allow me to let you come off mute. I'm sorry. If you could type your question. The regulations for the hand washing stations, those are under the Department of Health, Rebecca, and that will be in their presentation, as well as Jessica, you want to take that?
Yeah, I just didn't know what exactly Rebecca is looking for. Our food regulations, when you look at it, it looks like it is geared more towards brick and mortar facilities, but we are looking at trying to separate out, mobile unit and TFE requirements down the line, down the line. But I could email you the code sections applicable to hand washing. It's several, if that's what you're looking for.
Or the rules as it applies to hand washing.
Yes.
One of the questions that's come up a couple of times in here, and I know it was a question that came up prior to also, is regarding lemonade. We've got folks that do lemonade, limeade, the Thai coffees, things of that sort at market, and I know they fall under a couple of different agencies. So if somebody is doing, to Michelle's earlier question, if Michelle is doing lemonade concentrate at home, and then she's bringing it to market and adding water and ice to sell as a drink, where does that fall and what are the rules there? Then let's say they're bringing the whole lemonade that has lavender in it to market. That falls under, now that's a recipe, right? And that falls under a different, does that fall under a different requirement? Or Thai tea or limeade?
Was that question geared towards VDH? I'm sorry, I was typing a
Lemonade. I know
response.
you were answering
Yeah.
Rebecca's question regarding so VDH.
What was the question? I'm
I'm
sorry.
talking about lemonade or limeade and Thai coffees, things of that sort. So tell me who it falls under for regulation. Do they need a TFE to make and sell lemonade? Even if they're bringing the concentrate from home and adding water and ice to it at market, do they need a TFE?
So let's start with the bringing it from home, because that does not fall under VDH. If they are making concentrate at their home, they need to be inspected by VDAX, and Rochelle can, keep me honest there. But we don't inspect private homes. It's in our food regulations. So if you want to make lemonade or Thai tea or any beverage at the farmer's market, you're going to need to apply for a VDH TFE permit and follow all of our requirements.
Okay. And so flavored water would be the same. Anything you're doing to manipulate a basic product.
Right. The water has to come from an approved source, and your home under VDH is not an approved source. So for you to be an approved source for your home, you need to be under inspection by VDAX.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna add to that, if like an exempt vendor can't like make things at home to do on site under VDH as a TFE because they're not an approved source. If you're making lemonade, for example, you can make the lemonade, bottle it at home, do everything at home under VDAX permit because lemonade is not an exempt product.
Right.
But if you're gathering the pieces and doing things at home to then make it on site for VDH, that wouldn't really be allowed. And it also wouldn't be allowed for us because for us, you're manufacturing the product. You're not making a pitcher to do beverage service at the market.
And that's true for any kind of flavored juices that are being sold, flavored waters, lemonade, limeade, coffee, etc. You want to have hot coffee service at the market, cold coffee service, whatever.
Yeah, so you either package it under permit, fully done at home under VDAX, or you make it fully on site under TFE with VDH.
Yeah.
You can't like mix and match.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, so we've got somebody that's asking about, yes, our lovely cream cheese frostings, tres leches and cakes, milk, dairy, cheesecake, things of that sort. So at what point does it have to be kept in a cooler?
It depends.
Okay.
There really is not a great black and white answer to this. It really depends on the recipe. We recommend people either email us the recipe or send it to tech. Melissa Wright can very often just look at the recipe and be like, oh, this one's fine, or no, this one would require some more work.
Okay.
Sorry, it depends.
Yeah. So for the person here for Suhi, I would highly, with your sweets, I would highly recommend that you send the information, the recipe over to either Melissa. I see Melissa's getting ready to answer your question. But for anybody that's still on the call, please send your recipes in if you have any question, because you don't want to be doing something wrong, or you don't want to be unintentionally doing something that could potentially spoil. The folks at VDAX, VDH, the extension, they all are perfectly happy to look at your recipes and tell you what needs to be done so that everybody can be safe. Okay, so we have a question about stuff that's coming from an uninspected kitchen. Does each product have to be labeled and said this is not for resale, it's coming from an uninspected kitchen? Or can there be one sign on a market table? Rochelle?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes. So I know you're trying to answer all the questions behind the scene, but this comes up. So if you're selling from an uninspected kitchen, can you tell me the label? Does each product need to be labeled that says this is not for resale? It's coming from an uninspected kitchen, or can you just have one sign on your market booth saying that this is comes from an uninspected home kitchen? Can you go over that a little bit?
Yeah, so under the exemption, the products do need to be individually packaged and labeled. But now with like some of the updated language from last year, it says affixed with a label placed on the principal display panel, so essentially the front of the product, or for a product and packaging not large enough to bear such a label, offered for sale with a sign displaying the name, physical address, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're doing things like cake pops and things that are very small, a sign might be appropriate in that case, but in general, the thing should be labeled and packaged.
So jams, jellies, anything, sauces, any of that kind of stuff, it needs to be, hey, stop biting me. It needs to be labeled. I know it came up with the cake pops because of being able to affix a label to the stick. But almost every other product that's out there can have a label on it. So, and you want folks to know when they get it home that it came from a uninspected home kitchen. So
thank you.
No, thank you so much. Let me see if there's anything else here. Nina has raised her hand, so I have your question in the chat. Okay, so we've got a producer that produces mushrooms and microgreens. They want to know if they can take it to another vendor to freeze dry it, and if that falls under value added and is now shelf stable. I think they're going to have to answer your question offline. So you are growing the mushrooms and the microgreens yourself. You're taking them to somebody else who does freeze drying, and then you're going to get that product back to sell it. Is that correct? So you want to know what the regulations are as they pertain to that. If all of this is happening from 3 different approved vendors at a market, but you're changing the product. So what each of the vendors is approved to sell is different than what the end product is going to be. So that would need to be inspected, I would think, and permitted. Is that correct?
I was trying to follow the different pieces. So yes, we can discuss this more offline, but in general, what you're saying is right. Like each step has its own requirements. So some or all of the vendors might need to be permitted at some point, depending on what they're doing.
And then the final product would need to have its recipe approved and be permitted
Mhm.
since it's all coming from different. It's what each individual vendor is approved for is different than what the final product is.
Right.
Would have to be looked at as a separate product. Cool. So for Elizabeth Mabry, who is asking about selling her products in a grocery store, these rules that we're talking about here are specific to a farmer's market. So the rules may be different for a brick and mortar, and they may be different for wholesale. And so I highly recommend that you reach out to VDAX and they can direct you to the correct department for the regs regarding selling wholesale and or selling retail in a brick and mortar versus at a farmer's market. And cottage law only applies at a farmer's market. But somebody was asking if they want to sell microgreens in a grocery store. Does cottage law still apply or do they need a permit? And what permit do they need? Eric, is that you?
I don't believe so.
I feel like we've got a game of hot potato going on here. It was down near the bottom.
Which one is it?
Elizabeth Mabry, if she plans to sell microgreens in a grocery store, will the cottage food law still apply or will she need to be permitted?
Okay, so it sounds like she's a little bit confused. Okay.
Yes.
So we do have people that grow microgreens in their home, okay, like in a spare bedroom or a basement, and a tent or just kind of out in the open. And we do not consider that a cottage food business. Okay, we consider that as a farm because you're growing produce commodities and they're being cultivated, harvested, and sold, right? So again, forget the whole cottage food law thing. That doesn't apply unless you're taking those microgreens and turning them into salad bowls or other value-added products. All right, then that's where cottage food law comes into. And with that, again, you may or may not need an inspection. But yes, you can sell those microgreens to grocery stores, at farmers markets, to restaurants, and at any sales amount. However, once you get over that $25,000 mark in annual sales, you will need to have an inspection from us.
Thank you, Eric. So if they're actually taking it from a farm, and so instead of selling it at a farmer's market, they're selling it at a grocery store, does cottage law apply?
No, it's not even relevant.
Okay, it's not
It's
relevant.
just,
All right.
yes, because they're still under the produce safety law,
Yeah.
that aspect, and not
Okay.
food safety.
All right, thank you. And any last questions? The beef jerky question regarding selling it by the half pound or pound, that falls under weights and measures. Was your question answered sufficiently by Gary, or do you need further explanation? This was for Dewald Duprez. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name. And should you label each bag? Yes, you should label each bag. And it needs to be sold bulk. Or you can custom weigh it. Gary, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here for another minute.
Okay, I appreciate it. I know you got to go. This gentleman this individual is selling beef jerky in bulk and selling it on site in smaller custom weights and sizes, half pound or pound, depending on the client's request. Do they bag it and then label it?
I would suggest weighing it out and then bagging it, and that way you wouldn't have to have a label.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Gary. Thank you so much, Gary, for participating today. I know we are at noon, and I'm sorry, I had one last question that I'm going to let everybody go from Dr. Hedgepeth-Smith. Are micro-perforated bags permitted to help eliminate condensation regarding bagging? We might have to get the answer for you on that. Dr. Connie Hedgepeth-Smith, you have your hand raised. Did we answer your question regarding the perforated bags, or did you have an additional question for us? Oh, they sell sourdough and they want to know if it can go into a perforated bag to help eliminate condensation.
The question is just whether they can package in perforated bags. We don't have anything specific against that.
Okay.
Sourdough.
Perfect. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And so it can be packaged and labeled. Great. Thank you all for participating today. I so appreciate it. We will be back tomorrow at 9 o'clock, and it'll be the same format. We will have a brief introduction. We will have CBD hemp, pet food, dairy, and meat and poultry tomorrow. So if those topics do not apply to you and or you're not required by your market manager to participate, feel free to skip those sessions. And again, we will have all of the presentations on the website. The Q&A questions and answers will be sent out, as well as the links to the videos, etc. It's going to take a couple of weeks to do that. We also will verify participation. And so you should be receiving an email with all of this information, as well as you'll get an email with your certificate in the next 2 weeks or so. Thank you all for participating today, and we will see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. To all of my presenters today, thank you for being here, as well as all of you, the presenters for the rest of the sessions that joined us. I so appreciate you, and I look forward to having you participate tomorrow and Wednesday. Thank you all, and I'm going to end the meeting now. Y'all take care.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kim and everyone.
Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate it. Y'all were great, as always.